Too late. We're doing this Spider-Girl volume.
Hey everybody, I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction.
And I'm TK, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at xNateXGrayX.
And that can only mean one thing. We are continuing our deep dive into the Spider-Girl MC2 universe. You know, at this point, I think we can put Spider-Girl's name first.
We have to.
Because, I mean, I know MC2 is still on these covers, but I don't know that I feel that MC2 is always what's in their hearts.
No. Spoiler alert, everybody. There will be no other books covered. It is just Spider-Girl for this particular episode because at this point, no other books were coming out.
And as a matter of fact, at Spider-Girl 33, they ultimately go ahead and they drop that MC2 moniker, and it's just Marvel Comics Spider-Girl. And it really does begin to feel like the Spider-Girl of old, the sort of multi-title era Spider-Girl, is definitely done for.
Which has drawbacks and some advantages as well. It's just unfortunate that no matter how many attempts were made and no matter how much gold they seemed to hit, every other book fell flat on its face, and there was never a way to sort of stop, reassess, and do something a little more level-headed and standard in order to make this second Marvel Comics universe a viable option for multiple books.
And, you know, they come close, and there's stuff that happens in these issues where I'm like, Dark Devil is tame, right?
Yeah.
And there's some stuff that happens in these issues that's just pretty standard Spider fare in a way where I'm like, do they remember that this isn't just a Peter Parker book?
Yeah.
But we are here today to talk about Spider-Girl number 28 through 44, as that vaguely represents 3 trades, which has been our format this whole time. We cover 3 volumes, so we're here to cover Spider-Girl Volume 6, 28 to 33, Spider-Girl Volume 7, 34 to 38, and Spider-Girl Volume 8, 39 to 44, Too Many Spiders, Betrayed, and Duty Calls, respectively. These titles saw release from January 1st, 2001 through April of 2002. Now, what gets more interesting here than that is these trades came out in digest form in June of 2006 for Volume 6, in November of 2006 for Volume 7, and in April of 2007 for Volume 8. So, you know, that's like 5 fucking years after those issues came out. It's hard to imagine that that's the point at which that was the best way to capitalize on a title 5 years later.
Especially with not a lot happening with it at that time in terms of current continuity.
Yeah, you know, there's certain fandoms that aren't the biggest, most powerful fandom in the world, but if you serve them enough, they'll always buy it. Like,
right.
I know that as like a Twin Peaks person, if you release it, most of us just blindly buy it. It doesn't matter. We're in, we're going to keep going. We're going to find out everything we can. The mystery is there for us. So you can kind of keep pumping us full of that material. And I feel like in some ways, part of the problem Spider-Girl had is the core group of fans who were going to be dedicated to Spider-Girl forever. We're at that number, okay? We are at Spider-Girl's holding number forever. And at this point, Spider-Girl sells just over 26,700 copies of number 28, with some fluctuation down as much as 2,000, up as much as 1,000. Spider-Girl stays between 24,000 and 27,500 for years. She just doesn't see a lot of movement up or down, and it's a pretty important thing to consider because at this point, we are talking about sales at roughly a third of what that opening issue sold, and this is where it holds. This is where the numbers really stick. 25,000 people a month want to read about Mayday Parker.
This is her fan base. This is who she's got. I have to admit, even though we're doing this deep dive, and this is a character that I do find interesting, and I think about what I would like to see from her, I still don't think that I even count myself as like like a Mayday Parker stan, or that I'm like frothing at the mouth for Mayday to show up in current continuity. I feel that way a lot more about like Wild Thing, about Wolverine's daughter. So I think the idea that the fan base for her is what it is at this point, it probably applies to the future pretty much as well.
And of course, the comic wouldn't exist without the same people making it always. That is really, I need to point out, I think one issue of Spider-Girl ever isn't written by Tom DeFalco, and it's written by Sean McKeever, and it's issue 51, and it's a special fill-in, and they found that it did nothing to sales. The previous issue, number 50, saw, an issue bump, so let's go to the one before it. Issue 49 sold 26,600 copies. Issue 49 sold 26,600 copies. Issue 51 sold 26,600 copies. Issue 52, Tom DeFalco again, sold 26,600 copies. So it's not like it moved anything in any direction, right? But the normal stable of mad men and women that create this book are present here. You have Tom DeFalco writing everything. You have Ron Frenz and Pat Olive filling out the pencils throughout most of the issues, with the exception of issue number 39, seeing Chris Batista. Inks are primarily done by Al Williamson, also contributions from John Livesey, who is for some reason just credited sometimes as Livesey. Sure. Colorist Christy Scheel, she's bringing in some awesome colors with help on issue 42 from Heroic Age Studios. Letters throughout the whole thing by John Workman, with editing by Matt Hicks. I just want to put out there, the book does have a pretty solid editor. So it is definitely a very different, the same kind of Spider-Girl world. And I'm with you. I don't think I call myself a Mayday stan, in part because I'm finding her really irritating a lot of the time. Like, she makes really bad calls in a way that if she was a little bit more ready to bring in help, like there were so many, if the book became this team every fucking issue that never went anywhere. And I don't know. I'm really excited to talk about this batch of issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing now is, with nothing else to consider and sort of look left or right to, the focus on Mayday brings out the best and the worst in her as a character and in the book as a whole.
And, there's a lot to still appreciate about where this book is willing to go that I find a lot of fun. I guess there's no better place to jump in than let's start with number 28 and the character I never knew that I guess I was going to be accidentally obsessed with. I'm so here for Raptor and this weird redemption arc she's on. I, number one, think that the worst thing about the MC2 universe is that the character's name is Blackie Drago. That is 50% too far for me, and I would trade any number of things to get rid of that name. But I kind of love Raptor. I think she's kind of great.
So I'll be honest, my first note is, do I care about Raptor? And that was, it was a bold move to start this first issue of this next volume off with the big opening page being Raptor crashing through a window and flying away. I will grow to like her more as we continue, but at this point, I just felt like, especially coming off of the last issue where we had that really heartwarming coming to terms between May and Normie, starting off with Raptor, who at this point I definitely do not care about, was a choice that was made. I'll say this, it starts us on a path that's going to take us somewhere.
Yeah, and I think part of what makes this book likable is its decision that the best way to show love is to ratchet up the insanity every now and then. I think that by giving us Raptor in this form, she kind of has this, like, I guess I want to say cool, maybe she's a little bit Elektra and a little bit Daredevil and a little bit Bird person. And I also want to point out that the grocery store she's robbing, I guess the aisles are labeled hot cereal, cold cereal, and I just think that's great.
If you want one, you're likely going to want the other. It's funny because we're going to re-meet the Hardy family in these issues, but she's started to give me a lot of Felicia Hardy vibes, the kind of, she's a criminal for sure, but she's not a villain, but she needs to answer for the fact that she's doing crimes, but she also doesn't want to do crimes. Maybe she does want to do kind of crimes. That's always, the Selena Kyle characters. That's a fun type type of character, and it's a good contrast for May. The fact that we are going to meet some Hardys coming up maybe is unfortunate for Miss Drago, who could take a little more center stage otherwise. But I do love that this series overall is willing to say of basically any character, I don't know, they might be a good person, like they might be worthy of salvation and another chance. Let's see what happens, and then just go off on a journey.
Yeah, and that really is the thing that I think makes this book so endearing and likable. May's willingness to give anybody a second chance, and I have some really biting statements to make about characters that get second chances later on, but I really do think that the charm of this book has to do with the idea that maybe, just maybe, Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz thought any one of these characters could be a runaway hit.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he walked into the office and kept just going up, we could have the next Deadpool on our hands.
Yeah.
And, so his whole thing was always make sure that we get a little bit of every character, and there's way too many of them. And
they do not stop adding more.
No, they don't. They don't at all.
So many of my notes for each individual issue are, this book cannot handle an additional character, and then there's another one the next issue.
And there's always a mystery. There's always some sort of, but you can't really know who the person is, where I just want to be like, no, I deserve to know who one fucking person is. Right? I know it's going to be someone from the past, and it's going to be their kid, or their clone's kid, or their kid's clone, or like someone who has secret superpowers who's now an angel. I know it's gonna be one of these fucking things. So tell me right now, DeFalco. But one thing I really wish they would stop telling me is fucking Mayday doesn't have her powers.
I mean, when we started, or I should say when I started this particular batch of issues, I did not realize how long that was going to go on. And this was going to be her Jimmy Yama and Moose moment, where they just don't stop bringing up that she doesn't have powers, her not having them being part of the situation. It is the weirdest, like, teenage impotence metaphor, life lesson about character. I don't know what, but yeah, this is going to go on for a hot minute, folks. So strap in. Mayday does not have her powers, and she's not going to have them for a minute.
And I really like that you said impotence metaphor, because part of it for me is kind of like, for like a teenage male character, you see that a lot, but like, there's not a lot of, oh no, I made a Parker and my boobs stopped working. Like, so yeah, it is sort of really cool to see it on a female character, sort of the way we saw it with Storm in the X-Men in the 80s. So I do like that spin on it. That is a lot of fun. And it does soften the fact that I get so tired of her being like, I guess I gotta start training like a normie, as opposed to training like normie. But it's so many things where they're like, oh, she can't be Spider-Girl anymore. Maybe she can. Nope. Like, her parents are the most flip-floppiest, mixed up like a milkshake couple I have ever read. They don't know if their daughter should or should not be Spider-Girl. And they really need to make a decision, because in the course of this 16 issues, they go back and forth so many goddamn times.
And I would love it if they were like, holy fuck, we're really chaotic. Like, we're terrible at this. But every time they make the decision one way or the other, they're like, fucking, we nailed this. This is the exact right choice. Next panel. No, she should do it. That's the right choice. Next panel. Nope, she should not. That's the right choice. And every time it's just like, we're definitely doing the right thing. No problem. It would be so much better, funnier, and more true to life if they were like, I have no goddamn clue what I'm doing. I really want to keep my daughter alive, but I have no defense for the fact that I did the exact same thing. Like, everything. I mean, that's like the funny metaphor that I think Tom DeFalco is kind of missing in all this, is that idea that like your parents will look at you as a kid, and it usually for like in real life applies much more to like when you're 15 to 18 and you start partying a little bit more and your parents get really upset about it, and inevitably you have this moment where you say, I know you did the same things, you ended up fine, trust that I will too. And that's an interesting back and forth conversation that is almost happening here, but it's like the heart of it is kind of being missed. So it's just this like rote back and forth that is primarily dedicated to advancing the plot more than it is about revealing everybody's character state and what's important about each of of them.
Especially because I feel like so many characters don't have anything important to them. Speaking of rote ideas, it feels as though a number of the moments that get highlighted throughout this series are moments that Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz must have said back and forth to one another, hey, this is still something that goes on, right? And like, I'm sure that when he understood those things to be true to life, they were true to life. But there's things like, we couldn't get a hold of you, your parents were not being cool, so we have beef now. Like, no one's coming at you about your fucking parents. That's not a thing. And so that they try and create some of these more surreal contexts that I think seek to elevate her real life, that make her feel so far from reality. Like, she has the worst friends in the world, for sure.
Well, what's really interesting, we're going to keep coming back to this. She starts to have this really select, not cohesive, like they're not all friends, but she starts to collect some really amazing, interesting friends that are all not realistic. It's Normie, it's Stinger, it's American Dream. These people feel like her confidants, her peers, the people that she should be having conversations about how complex her life has become. And that starts to happen. And it is really interesting every time, even when it's a character like Normie, who is a fucking mess. But they keep connecting her to her high school friends, and it is never plausible. None of the high school friends are interesting. None of their drama is interesting. And May's involvement is less than 50%, and less than 20% of the time is she ever like, I actually really do care. So when the story takes us to a moment where she goes, oh no, I really actually do care about high school and my high school friends, it's completely implausible, because for the most part, she never does.
I agree completely. And especially when they try and constantly point out that her friends are like, no, you suck. You know, that is really such a defining part of her relationship with these characters. I would be much more relieved if she was somehow removed from the high school setting at this point, you know, and it's a weird thing that I think we used to say, oh, that shows character, but now we actually understand shows bias. There's this thing that I feel May does a lot where she says, oh, I know that person for real. That's my friend. They would never do such a thing. I need to investigate. But then the minute she hears Raptor is back in the crime biz, she's like, she crippled somebody. She's a nightmare. We have to stop her. Like, there's this idea that a person is the core of who they are, and she's the arbiter of that. That is both really true to being a teenager, but also really dangerous and a superhero.
And it's the fact that it goes kind of uninvestigated. Like, ultimately, with Raptor, it just ends up being true. Like, until May passes the judgment that she's okay, she's not okay in the book. And then once May decides that they're actually friends and that Raptor's going to try and go on the straight and narrow, that becomes the assumption, like, in universe, not just for May, who we're following, but no longer will the storytelling seek to ask the question, will Raptor or won't Raptor be a criminal? So every time May makes the decision, it's just taken as gospel to the universe as a whole. And there are a couple times where that's kind of fiddled with, but again, it doesn't feel so much like somebody was like, here's an interesting way to turn that on its head. It just feels like that's where the story needed to go. So rather than investigate further, they just took the next step in the plot.
And I mean, we saw it for sure with Nancy Liu, who becomes a pretty significant character in these 3 volumes. Nancy Liu being the telekinetic student that, you know, May stalked. And we see her back here. And once again, though, there's this sort of thing where if May has ever had a bad thought about you, it's because there's something bad inside of you. And Nancy Liu strikes out with her powers against May in an issue here. And I do feel a little bit like May acts like the morality police. And we see her, I don't want to say that she's like a corruptive influence, because she's definitely not. You know, that's just the act of being in this world. But, you know, Jimmy Yama goes from the voice of social reason, who is like, I think I have to put Moose back with Courtney, even though they are both terrible people. And, you know, then he's like, what? I can't help it if blonde hottie wants to ride on the Jimmy train. And everybody's kind of like, you're disgusting. So I don't know. There is that moment where she's like, Normie, I forgive you. And he's like, now I am a good person.
Oh, I have a note in here where he's like, I used to be a real jerk. And I'm like, Normie, you were a fucking murderer. What are you talking about, real jerk? Unhinged.
You were literally a murderer. And now you're just like, had a couple bad days, but
And
now
also,
I
you're like
plant
in and out of a
flowers.
sanitarium that has no rules. It is just completely out there. And yet, the relationship I'm most invested in, I don't care if it's even romantic. I just think Normie is her friend. That is her best friend. That's her person. Their interpersonal stuff and how it applies to superhero life and everything matters. And it's interesting for her. And it shows who she is as a person in a way that her relationship with Davida just never does. Spoiler alert, by the end of this volume, Davida still does not know that she is Spider-Girl and knows nothing about the life that she's leading. And on the flip side, May really doesn't know much about these friends anymore or what's going on in their lives. She cuts in and out of their stupid drama, but it barely ever ties into what it means to be Spider-Girl or what it means to be a hero in MC2. It's just an additional plot device or distraction for her.
Yes, I agree, because I really found myself really looking forward to the Normie scenes.
Yeah.
And what's crazy about the Normie stuff is it feels like Normie took a big jump back into the limelight when Ron Frenz returned to the character. You know, he had been doing his own stories under the MC2 imprint, so it kind of makes sense that he was doing his own thing. But it's funny because I so look forward to every scene between Normie and Mayday, but any scene between the Goblin Boys, and I'm just like, oh god. I'm just like, this can't end well. There is
but
no
even
good
those
thing
I
here.
love because of what the implications are going to be for May. Like, I hate them and they're the stupidest things. But at the same time, all I can think about is like, this additional person getting in between May and Normie will affect the rest of May's life in a way I care about, where I don't care when Nancy Lou starts getting between May and JJ.
Which, by the way, I have some rather unpleasant notes about the timeline on that.
Yeah.
And I can't even begin. You know, one of the things that also is shocking to me is when I read an X-Men book. Part of what I love about an X-Men book is I can follow 6 of the characters, and hopefully I get to follow at least 4 of them in any issue. Something I love about a really strong Daredevil title is the villains are so well developed that there's a lot of times following their continuous narrative, writer to writer, arc to arc. The other characters we spend time with here are the other high school kids that all talk vaguely like 40-year-old people think their kids talk. And the dialogue isn't realistic because the situations aren't that interesting. I'm not saying that any of these things, should they happen in real life, aren't, you know, important to the people they're happening to, but the mundanity of the drama that the characters that are not Mayday experience, that we are then expected to want to follow these what should be pimply faced teenagers but are really just secretly Gap models. You know, it's really a difficult thing to ask me to give up that much page space to something else.
And because people our age, and it's funny because it was coming out at the same time, and I actually started rewatching some of it just because I needed comfort TV while I was doing my notes for this. People our age got to see Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who the friends integrated into the hero stuff. They were never plot devices. They were never just plot devices or obstacles for Buffy. They were so often, they knew exactly who she was, and they were often fighting right next to her in a way where it made sense that they would enter into the plot and be a potential plot device. But their contribution to her life as a whole was total. It was never, I'm living these 2 separate lives. That 2 separate lives story is a fine one, but it has to be a finite one because it gets really old. And I can believe it's finite in this story that still has dozens of issues left, but it has now gone on too long. And the fact that the high school friends are not integrating into May's life as Spider-Girl at all is making them less and less interesting. And more importantly, they just don't matter to who May is, like who Spider-Girl is. They don't matter at all.
And it's not even to say that her friends don't matter to her, because I can think of like 10 people that I think May defines herself by. And one of them is horrifyingly and embarrassing Phil Urich. Poor, foolish Phil. The Golden Goblin who, you know, I gotta be real, Golden Goblin is almost hot. And then he's like, no, I'm gonna go back to the classic colors. And I'm like, what was the point of this reskin? You didn't even make a Game Boy Advance game. What was the point?
The point was to have the story that we all knew it wasn't going to be what it looked like, where Normie says, like, he's got plans. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, I'm bringing the goblin back. Dun, dun, dun. The goblin's back. Oh, no, is he evil? No, of course he's not fucking evil. And also, it's not Normie, it's Phil. Like, ugh. I like the idea that a goblin person comes back as a hero and that it's not Normie. But again, it's one of these moments in this story where they're like, bet you didn't see this coming. And it's like, no, sir, I've read comic books now for a long time. I did see this coming. I like the plot, but maybe we spend a little less time like trying to psych people out and just do something that works organically. And in a lot of ways, I think the Golden Goblin worked a lot more organically. And even though I liked the story elements of, you know, Normie getting back into goblin stuff, but doing it for good, but then not actually taking the role because he can't, so it's Phil. I liked all that, but going back to the Green Goblin costume was a silly plot device that then left us with something that just isn't as exciting narratively as the thing we had before, which was the Golden Goblin.
You know, telling us that this is some crazy new thing just makes that it's not look kind of more awkward. And to that end, if they mentioned Spider-Girl on a glider one more fucking time, these people need anything else to be interested in. Oh my God, they are essentially obsessed with some teenage superhero's whip. They gotta get over this.
Yeah, and it's that thing where, you know, her not having her powers just isn't really a compelling story to go on this long. And so to keep adding elements to it, like because she does not have her powers, but she still wants to keep being a superhero, she asks Normie to use a glider and uses pumpkin bombs, and so is superheroing without any like supernatural instincts or strength or any abilities whatsoever. And she's just riding around on a glider throwing pumpkin bombs. It's actually kind of funny when you say it like that, but it doesn't really pan out to anything. And it's just this extended story that keeps repeating the same beats over and over again. We definitely get that May really wants this, doesn't know who she is now without it. And it is difficult for her to understand herself without her Spider-Girl abilities. But the glider thing, which could have just been like a couple panels or something, doesn't work as a really long-term device. But man, does it go on for a while, and man, does everybody talk about it.
Because here's part of it that drives me crazy. We are talking about 3 volumes in which the Fantastic Five go to space for the afternoon. Okay, so we are talking about a world where the technology is such that they can just go to the negative zone. I don't think a well-balanced hover glider is that advanced a technology anymore. And for them to act like this is literally the only form of jet propulsion that there is, like there's no mention of maybe they should reach out, especially since the Fantastic Five know something's up. Maybe they can give her some sort of adhesive gloves, some sort of grapple shoes. There's no, we can reach out to a Next where she's a reserve member. Maybe Mainframe can hook her up with a pair of propulsion boots. Something. There's no, we can give her a glide cape. There's just, oh, her powers are gone. She's fucked. Oh, she can borrow this glider? Okay. Everyone talk about the glider. That's not this world.
It's not the world. It's not the most interesting story. I think really the thing to have done would have been to make issue 28 a story where she doesn't have her powers and it seems as though she's not going to have them. And because of that, she has to accept that she will no longer be Spider-Girl. And she attempts to examine her life as just May and finds that like cripplingly difficult, comes to term in some way, and then her powers come back just naturally. That's all that we really needed. This goes on for such a long time to explore the idea of who is May without her powers, but she never accepts that she doesn't have her powers. She just does weird workarounds that it becomes multiple issues just about the workarounds in this life that she leads, with like a couple of moments of like, just do your best and it'll be okay, but no real kind of introspection about what this means for her and how she sort of sees herself. It just goes on really long, and it doesn't, again, it's like the high school friends. It just doesn't elucidate who May is as a person the same way that, you know, somebody like Normie does, or a more straightforward and just like universally accepted replacement for her powers might do.
Because another thing thing that I find myself struggling with is their struggle to fill that time. Every issue seems to end with May in bed thinking about how not having her powers either means she has to do push-ups or she should rest. Like, that's the only two modes. And then the next issue seems to always start with a training montage. And I know comics are basically, soap operas with superpowers. But one of the things I didn't need from the soap opera model to be borrowed is reusing the end of last episode as the beginning of this episode. That's not a trope that I need, especially because, let's face it, at this point, Spider-Girl is not designed for anybody to just pick up an issue and jump in. Characters don't have their names said in whole issues. That's not even counting the characters that don't have their names said on purpose. But like, when these characters pop back up, there's never any explanation about who they are. Sometimes, the number of people I had to look up and were like, oh, that is or isn't an original 616 character that they just transported to 98.2. I don't know.
Yeah, I stopped doing it.
Yeah, it got too hard.
Yeah.
It got too hard. So then when one of them is, spoiler alert, ultimately Jim Rhodey, it's like, what?
Yeah, I actually did not realize that until you said it. I think I just glossed over because it was another person and I just don't care. And I just completely missed that it was Rhodey.
Yeah, it's the very large, strapping security. Unfortunately, one of the only black men in Tony Stark's world, follows him around, is a body man for him. It's Rhodey, and it's frustrating because there actually are a lot of really great characters of color in this universe. I wish Lady Hawk got more dialogue because I do like the Ladies Hawk at this point. They are at least characters that I am willing to root for. And of the friends, Davida is, while the most actionable, the least personally offensive. So
she's the one that I want to pull out of this fucking mess. All I want is for her to find out that May is Spider-Girl and be like, I have your back every time. That's all I want.
Yeah, I will lie for you. I will protect you because what you do is important. And what I do to help you do it will also be important.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate that we already have Richie for that in The Buzz, who doesn't get enough page time, although we do see him later this episode. So I'm pretty excited about that. One of the things about the Lady Hawks that they do remind me is that Phil serves no purpose. Phil just does nothing for me. Phil, at this point, he really is always an extra. He's other Normie to wear the suit. He's other Peter, so Peter can have other things going on. He's other person that can tell her about the past. But there really is no singular purpose that Phil Urich serves, and this story, issue 29, really continues to hammer that home. He's just the everyone talks to him guy.
Yeah, that really is all of it. We still don't really have any sense of his internal struggle. Is he wrestling with some kind of mental illness? Is he feeling some kind of lean towards moral gray area? None of it really comes up. He just is a stand-in for what the plot calls for. And these weird moments that we had in previous issues where you would see him do the goblin laugh and it was vaguely menacing and it gave you this idea oh, this guy might be a little unhinged and maybe continuing to do goblin stuff will not be good for his mental health. That's all completely gone, and he's just kind of doing it as needed for the story to go forward, which is just unfortunate because he could be a really, really interesting character.
But I think Normie just steals the show all the time. Yeah, I think about that next sequence immediately following the eye roll Phil sequence where she's like, Mom, I think I'm going to be a no powers hero. And Mary Jane is like, no, my boobs are this far apart in this panel. And I feel there's no other way to describe that panel.
Truly that panel, next level.
Yeah, it's really incredible because she looks incredibly beautiful and normal and Mary Jane and powerful and strong in her next panel. So it's really just that one panel is really interesting. But she's like, you can't be a non-powered superhero. And then she says she's going to see a non-spandex friend. And that non-spandex friend is a person she fought in, I guess, maybe neoprene. What do I know? But the Christmas tree just hanging out behind Normie, I think is meant to indicate the passage of time, maybe. I don't know. But once again, now we're talking about how she's got a cool glider. And I'm like, what? And the way they talk about technology and the gliders, it's so embarrassing. It almost reminds me of Simpsons dialogue where it's oh, well, I have a Pentium 3 processor. Oh, well, I have a Pentium 4 processor. It does start to feel like that a little bit. it, and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Again, the moment where she talks to Mary Jane really has potential to be like a, mom telling you the thing that you really can't hear but need to, which is without your powers, you cannot do this. It's not a good idea. Or you need to completely rethink this and do it differently. Like if you want to be American Dream who fights without powers, you need to completely rework your plan. Taking it in that direction, really cool. Taking it in the direction of just give me a glider and let me throw pumpkin bombs is not the move. And it's definitely not the move to go on for multiple issues.
It's not the move and it's not the vibe. That's
Not
for
the
sure.
vibe.
Because, it is the vibe at this point. I'm convinced that for whatever reason, May has learned her definition of like cool, sexy from her dad, which is why she says stuff like, hubba, hubba, who's the hunk? Because that's the kind of stuff Peter still says.
Yeah.
So that's why it sounds so horrible coming out of a young woman's mouth. Number one, Rhodey looks fucking hot as hell as the unnamed character, but I didn't need another Nova appear. There's so many Nova appearances here, and none of them are interesting. Nova always sucks. And Nova just sucks.
Nova is the absolute worst. And the book, even May is like, Nova is the worst. So why would we want him here? Like, he inspires one, like, kind of funny, interesting thing. But if this all has been a build-up for that one thing that he inspires, it was not worth it. Nova serves no purpose. He is the worst, and he brings nothing to any issue.
And J. Jonah Jameson looking exactly like Stan Lee isn't helping anything. But when he's like, what's a spider character doing on a goblin ride? Stop it! Like, I just get so mad. Nova has been so minor, and May yelling at him doesn't feel like her owning anything. It feels like
the audience being like, we hate him too.
Yeah, it feels like a shortcut to let us know that he's a bad guy.
Yeah,
not a bad guy,
it's
but a bad
fine
guy.
that we don't like him, but he's going to keep showing up. And the problem, Dark Devil serves this purpose so much better, because Dark Devil we do like, but he gives May such a hard time that he's frustrating, and you kind of don't like him, but you really want to like him. So it's just like compelling to see him show up more, because maybe things will change. Nova, don't like Nova, don't care about Nova. Nova has nothing to do with anything. Nova doesn't have a weird backstory, and if he does, I don't care about it. And he just is being a dick to May, and she doesn't like it, and neither do I.
And I gotta be real, part of why it bothers me is because there are better heroes that I do like seeing, like the American Dream and Stinger appearance in issue 30, which I don't understand issue 30's cover. Like, is it supposed to be like a fashion cover, or did I just not realize that vaguely Paula Abdul's straight up video is very associated with the number 30? I don't know. I just keep expecting MC Cool Cat to come out and tell me I'm doing a great job. But as I'm looking at this, number one, this is not Stinger. I know Stinger. Stinger is a horrible, horrible person. Stinger is hateful, and she's mean, and she thinks you're stupid, okay? I love this character. She's great.
Maybe this is an unused Skrull invasion storyline that we don't realize is happening.
Or maybe, feeling like she's got her family back, and she's got Doom's kid, whatever his name was again. Kristoff. I was like, Hugo Doom. I don't remember. So I guess she's got baby Hugo or whatever. She's doing right. She's doing great. And I did think that the dialogue here was like, once again, this doesn't sound like what I would expect people who have been in life or death situations to talk like. And I know that what I'm talking about is a comic vaguely aimed at kids, but then this should have like the kid banner on it as opposed to being like a regular reader's comic. And you're veering to the right. Oh, wow, what a great catch. Thanks for not crippling me when I didn't notice. Is just such a weird exchange. And the dialogue is stilted and it's awkward and it doesn't help us to get to know May better. These are the same conversations she's been having with these same women since the first issues of this title. And other than this gives us the least likable Tony Stark of all time. And that is saying something. I'm not sure what the next appearances in this run are meant to, because they become very unclear. It gets very back and forth on if they like May or not. And it was a fun start to something that I feel ultimately doesn't pay off the way I wanted.
I agree about the payoff. My my note when this came up is, again, these are her real friends. The people that can understand her are other superheroes, because what she has discovered is what she truly is a superhero, like her father. So the people, the girls that she's going to bond with are other female superheroes. I love that concept, and it makes me, again, resent her high school friends because I don't care about them, and I would like that page time to go to Stinger and American Dream, who, you're right, the dialogue, this is the same exchange they're always having, basically. And then unfortunately, from here, we are diving into a storyline where that friendship is going to kind of wither and get awkward in a way that once we get through this, we'll be better for it. It just kind of is terminated or taking a hard left or who knows what. But this was a moment where I was like, these are friends for her. This is something I'm excited to see. And the fact that it went in this direction of like them talking to a really terrible Tony Stark, that was a bit of a disappointment. But more broadly, the fact that this friendship doesn't actually pick up and go anywhere, and indeed kind of gets worse, is a real bummer, because the high school friends just are not picking up the slack.
And I start to get really, really confused about the high school friends situation, because I remember the end of The Buzz being they're kind of coupley now.
And I kind of thought that they were like, oh, you're definitely the Buzz and you're definitely Spider. Like, they were giving each other a look like, it's you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I double checked the numbers. The Buzz was August and September of 2000. This is March of 2001. This is a fucking year later.
Right.
How?
Right. So that relationship has completely withered, basically off panel. Like, the Buzz ends with them really connecting, and it seems like literally understanding who the other is as a superhero. And when we start to see them interact again, there's no indication that time has passed or a single thing has happened or changed. And yet mostly May can't be bothered with JJ, which, again, because he's a high school person and she can't be bothered with them. But it's so unfortunate because he's the fucking Buzz, and that's a perfect person for her to connect with and have something with. And I was so excited for the idea that we might start to see them being superheroes together, knowing who each other are in the high school environment, really being able to pair up and have some interesting interaction. And it just goes in the complete opposite direction.
Because there is no team up in this whole universe I want more than Wild Thing, Raptor, Spider-Girl, and the Buzz. Like, that is my fucking MC2 super dream team.
Yeah.
I think that is such a great chemistry, especially if Richie's the man in the van, helping take care of everything. You can have all of the other characters fill in a fifth spot as needed. But I love Raptor by the end of this run. I love the friend that because by the end of this, she really does seem to be what we want May to have, like a BFF to talk to when this stuff happens. But this whole skywriting Raptor meet us at the place, and then it looks like she got set up, and then it's the next day, and I couldn't figure out how it was the next day and that time was supposed to have passed. It just felt like everything was so piled on top of itself and moving at a speed that I had a little bit of trouble with. One of the big things is there's too many short scenes, and I thought about what a lot of older comics fans, and I don't mean older people, I mean fans of older comics, would say. And it's often things like, well, that's you getting your money's worth. It's only you getting your money's worth if, don't give me a puzzle with 1,000 pieces that doesn't actually make anything and tell me that, well, it's 1,000 pieces, so it's better than a 400-piece puzzle. Sure, if what I want is more and more complex without necessarily any payoff, then this is the speed for me. But the back and forth, the amount of flip-flopping, it just gets really confusing.
It's also insane that her high school basketball coach demands that she spy on / make friends with a girl for the sole purpose of getting her on the basketball team. And that's an ongoing plot in which he constantly has this sinister, you better have warmed up to her, girls moment. And they kind of go along with it.
Seriously, I swear to God, in the modern times, if this happened in the real world, a year from now, we would all be watching a Netflix documentary special called Feelin' Loose and Slammin' Heat, the Coach Flash Thompson story.
Oh my God.
It would be horrifying. So
It's just such a weird additional high school plot line that has nothing to do with anything that was not necessary for this book.
Truly. But you know what I did kind of love about issues like 30 to 32, the Too Many Spiders run, like 28 to 33, it did actually have some amount of continuing action. 31 picks up from a part 1 of part 2 kind of situation. And I really liked that because I felt like maybe they were hearing our notes in the past, in the future. And they understood that one of the things that we've really been hoping for is a little bit more interconnectivity, not just between titles, but like between the issues of Spider-Girl. Sometimes it feels to me like Tom DeFalco didn't read the previous few issues because this isn't picking up where I want anything to pick up.
I mean, there's always like minimum 2 storylines I don't care about at all involving the high school, but they do travel issue to issue. And there's the, like what's going to happen with Raptor is a multi-issue arc, and it goes in a bunch of different directions. It's a really interesting story, and watching Raptor struggle with the fact that she wants to make amends for having been a criminal, but really doesn't want to go to jail, doesn't have to if she doesn't want to, but doesn't want the life or the ramifications that would come from not going through the justice process as it has been laid out before her. That's a really fucking cool concept and struggle. It's a great thing for a character who's going to be, a friend and secondary character in this book. It's a great multi-issue arc, and it's so much better than just doing Monster of the Week. Unfortunately, we are still getting a little bit of Monster of the Week within individual issues as we get these more connected stories, but the connected stories make it a lot more palatable and also make it a lot easier to forgive whoever the Monster of the Week is, because they're not so central that they have to be the entire book plus one high school storyline I don't care about. Even if it's the A plot, there's enough B plot, but a lot of times it's the B plot. So it's just like there's other stuff to focus on that is cool, such that it all is working a lot better right now.
And I think I can't believe it. Like I get so excited to talk about this with you because the things that we think are a little bit too cracked out, I love that we love things about anyway, because I forgot she didn't have her powers. I mean, she still really doesn't have her stupid fucking powers.
Yeah.
But I definitely forgot that she didn't have them at this point. I love that she stands up to Tony Stark, because Tony Stark, I'm a big Tony Stark fan, actually. I think he represents a necessary evil, and everybody that thinks Tony Stark is a frustrating character, he could be a lot fucking worse. And he is a man at odds in his own mind at all times. That's my Tony Stark, a man who wants to be better but has trouble shouting down his more attractive demons. And he needs a Peter Parker to be like, you're dumb. And Mayday is a great character to do that with. But this is where I get very confused. I think there's too many good bad guys right now. I'm pretty sure Dark Devil's wanted. I'm pretty sure Raptor's wanted. I'm pretty sure the Buzz is wanted. And I'm starting to drown in a lack of clarity on who we're supposed to be chasing. Who is the person here? Raptor, or is it the Buzz? And why can't Mayday have a good friend? If I were Mayday, I would pout sitting on the glider too, which not cute. I don't like that diminionization of her. But, it's at least we get Johnny Storm looking real hot.
We also need to talk about the most important revelation about the MC2 universe that comes from May's meeting with Tony Stark.
Oh,
GW Bridge is president.
I'll let you cross the bridge.
Yeah, GW Bridge is president in this universe, which I think is without a doubt, in a series of increasingly unhinged decisions about the details of this universe, the most unhinged detail about this universe.
Because I don't even, I have a lot of things to say about some of the more unique character choices that they make here and there. There are characters that appear more in the MC2 universe than their Marvel counterparts. So, while GW Bridge isn't quite that extreme, he's not even like much of a Spider-Man character. So Who is that for?
It's literally for me reading this issue in 2022.
Yeah. And it's really a fun ride that we see so many characters in this issue. I think 31, maybe they thought that 30 as a nice round number. I think that's something people don't take into consideration enough, that like every 5 issues for your first couple of issues of your first like couple of the trades you can kind of get people to jump in on. Oh, issue 5, a great jumping on point. Issue 10, great jumping on point. Issue 15, 25, 30. It's like 40 where everyone's like, well, I'll wait for 50, thank you. But I think maybe they thought that following 30 with that fucking fashion cover that people might check out 31, because I do feel like 31 ultimately tries to draw attention to the Courtney Moose, Jimmy, JJ Brad situation, the JJ Buzz, JJJ Iron Man situation, the lack of power stuff, the Parker family and normie drama, the ongoing threads of the bigger MC2 with appearances from Tony Stark, which automatically conjures up the idea of a next. Like, this issue reads maybe a little too much like a shorthand catch up on the MC2 at times.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's still fun, but it is that principle of like, we're giving you your money's worth. Like, every single panel has 5 characters in it and you won't believe who they are.
But I do. I believe who every one of them is.
Exactly.
That's the thing. I love seeing the Buzz because I really like the Buzz. You know, it's an aesthetic I appreciate. I think one of the things that I love the most about this universe is the sharp color choices, because, you know, the Buzz's colors are always so saturated in a way that make him stand out on the page. And I think that's a little bit of the like cocky bravado that I really do like about him, that he has that sort of, I'm bold, I'm bright. It's really good to see the Buzz, and I enjoy getting a couple of panels from his perspective because, you know, like his first person visual as opposed to necessarily his own narration or anything, because he is a character that I want to see grow with this universe. And I love this team up of Spider-Girl, the Buzz, and Raptor versus A-Next versus, I don't know, Starkman. I don't know. But the fight does wind up, number one, drawing attention to how uninteresting some of like the regular team up fights can be. But number two, the ending is so awkward. Just, oh, ha ha ha, I'll let you guys fight. Bye. What?
And we still have not resolved the Mayday Powers situation.
No, and that's getting almost confusing because you start to wonder if maybe that's the way they're going to make this different than proper Spider-Man, by making him a different sort of hero with having powers versus his daughter who had powers but now uses technology that is amassed through the legacy of her dad. And that could be really interesting. You know, like a hero who didn't inherit their parents' power, but instead uses their parents' legacy to save the day. I love that, but that's not what they do. No, but instead we get the issue that when I tried to talk to you about it, you said, I just checked out.
I completely checked out. Again, like right off the bat, I was like, don't need a new character. Did not need to add anybody else. And yet here we are with
Steel Spider. Yeah, who's real, turns out.
Yeah, I did not look this up. This was another one. Didn't look it up. I just assumed they were like, oh, now is the perfect time to add another spider person. So here is a large sad man that is part Doc Ock, part Silver Samurai, part Spider-Man.
And that's pretty much what he is. He was like the descriptions of him refer to him as like a rotund child. And he like became a Doc Ock. He became like Kid Ock basically. And then decided to become like Kid Spider, and then became Steel Spider. And he is a real thing from the proper Marvel universe. And I guess if you know who he is, he could be interesting, but you can't submit, I need to beat you to death kind of thing. Am I supposed to care?
He's so upset. He literally is crying in the final panel because these villains that he's trying to capture will not fight back. They just surrender, and he's so upset about it. And I could not bring myself to investigate whether or not there was more going on here. I didn't need a new character. If I was going to get one, it couldn't be this guy.
Yes, that's the problem. Not this guy. Not this guy. When J2 hasn't had dialogue in like beyond a line in like 10 issues. Not when Wild Thing hasn't appeared since right after her series. Not when so many things, right? And then the school stuff starts up, and Courtney is the worst person in the world.
Okay.
And
before we get to that.
Oh, please.
Digital page 5, first panel, Ron Friends, what the fuck are you doing with May Parker's face?
Yeah, that is particularly Mark Bagley bad guy face.
That look will haunt my nightmares until the day I die.
Yeah, I would absolutely. And like, it's even what she's saying. Whoa, someone seems to be in a
Like,
hurry.
she's literally terrifying Courtney, who maybe deserves it at this point. But like, this was the strangest panel in this volume for me.
Yeah, and I don't root for Courtney. I really don't. I think they use that she is drawn to be a fuller figured young woman when she's not even really, but she's also drawn to have like childish hair and these big 1980s Babysitters Club cover glasses. And I think that's supposed to be shorthand for she's innocent and likable, but she's always mean and she's always yelling at everybody and she always thinks she knows what's best, and that she's like, May, you're a bad person for not dropping everything when a friend who is also frequently a bully and has terrorized your friends in the course of this title, when that guy hurts his leg at football practice, which is a normal thing that happens to athletes in the course of their athletic career, you suck.
Yep, that was my exact note. Breaking your leg in football is like a completely common thing. It's not weird at all. I played high school sports. My friends got injured all the time. Never once was anybody like, you weren't there for the injury. I like either his mom died and she didn't go to the funeral, or it's fine. And it just makes Courtney look like an asshole when I'm waiting for her to be the Willow. Like, she has that Willow vibe, and but she's staying in episode 1 mode where she's not growing. The only thing that has grown about her is that she and Moose are together, but it just, neither of them is changing as a character really because of it.
And it also puts Davida in a horrible position where she is starting to become like the town shit stirrer. A lot of times Davida just comes in and just basically says, ooh, sass, and then just kind of like walks out of the panel. And that's not enough to be a character. She's worth so much more than that. And I feel like we're sort of handling a weird shorthand on everybody. Peter is just like a whiny man baby, and Phil is just this wet noodle that's always running around. But I find the teenage drama particularly exhausting because in the course of this particular volume, they do go out of their way to highlight just how much May's personal drama storylines got set up and dropped. You know, oh, well, at least I dated her. Well, I liked her. Well, so did he. And that never came to, oh, but he also liked that like, it gets to be ridiculous.
It does. And it, again, we've got JJ right there, and he's the buzz, and they really had something. And this is where we see, like, now that has completely been dropped. They don't know who the other one is as a superhero, so they're not connecting on that level. And because they're not connecting, JJ is now kind of dating Nancy Lou, which is fine, whatever, who gives a shit, but it's just such a lost opportunity for May to have somebody to connect with who is a peer, who would understand what she is going through. But we are expected to believe that she would care about the lives of these people that she has really nothing in common with when it comes to what's in her heart, which is being a superhero, the thing that she is so obsessed with that when she literally should stop doing it because it could kill her, she tries to find ways around it that are really stupid, but like in a way where you're like, well, high school students.
And it becomes almost self-defeating. Like, she wants to believe the lie so bad that these people still matter to her that she's almost torturing them with it.
Yeah.
Like, the better thing to do would be to leave these people's lives.
Yes.
And maybe even be like, look, I need to have a sit down with the Buzz. Because I really thought they knew each other's shit by the end of that story. That's really what I walked away thinking.
Yeah. It was like a almost heart-dropping shock for me, because I thought that what we were going to start getting from here was, teenage superhero couple, which I thought this was a perfect time for it. And it could have been the thing that helped to bridge with another person who is dealing with the same thing of like, I go to this high school and I guess I care about these people, but I'm also a superhero. Like, maybe that could have convinced me that May should care about them and I should care about these stories. But it's just like a completely missed path that the story does not go down. And instead they have no idea who the other is. And they're just dealing with stupid I'm too busy for you. You didn't give me enough attention. I want to give you more attention. Now you like this other girl. Stuff that just doesn't matter to a person who like fights aliens.
Yes. Yes. And it's because of all of the fake emotional moments that I guess the real emotional moments stick out so well. The moment between MJ and
Oh my
Normie is
God.
why I buy the whole fucking series.
Oh
Buy
my
the whole fucking
God.
series for that moment.
Yep. I really thought it was perfect. They have set up from the get-go that Mary Jane cares about Normie, that she's also not afraid of him, that this is somebody that she has known since he was a baby, and that as much as she loves him, she won't put up with his shit. She's not afraid of him. But when he does make amends and try to reform, she wants to love him and she wants to go, be anti-M. And I just think it's such a sweet moment. And the fact that they're spending their time talking about how they can both see that May is Spider-Girl and they wouldn't want her to be anything else. Just, again, it just highlights that is who she is. That's the thing that's important. It doesn't matter that she is a high school student. It matters that she's Spider-Girl.
It got stuck in my throat. That was really a moment that like I felt in my throat. And I was like, wow, this is why I like this universe.
And honestly, her hanging out with American Dream, kind of the same thing for me, especially after the moment with JJ. Like, JJ in high school doesn't matter. Her friend, American Dream, who shows up and goes, relax, I'm on your side. I buy it. I'm here to team up with you. Like, I am your friend. That's her friend. That's the person I care about. I don't care about Courtney.
And I love getting all of the stuff that connects her to Peggy and Sharon. It's a nice thing to see because I feel like because we get so much from May's point of view, everybody else's legacy always feels less important. That was one of the reasons that we liked J2 and Wild Thing so much. They made those legacies seem important. A-Next never really made anybody's legacy seem important. Everybody always seemed annoyed by their legacy. But this was a thing where I was like, oh, American Dream, I can see why you get a miniseries. I can see why you appear later.
And it's one page. It's all you need. We don't need everybody to get multi-issue arcs or their own book. If you give us, she shows up, she says, hey, I'm your friend, and then you give us one page of backstory, I buy that this is her friend, that she is a real person with a whole life that is important, and I care about them together, and that is not something I feel about a lot of the people in her mundane life.
And when we cut back to those goddamn mundane people in her goddamn mundane life, I'm done with football. And he's like pouting, but he's so enormous. The pouting is threatening. And for Jimmy and fucking, I can never tell if it's Brad or JJ.
And
I never know.
Another dude who looks exactly like them.
And it's so fucking frustrating because these characters just don't come to life on the page. And there is so much a girl is mine to own that really, I just can't do it.
Nope.
And what I also can't do is just how fucking pathetic Steel Serpent is. He is the high school character's level of pathetic.
Yeah, this one I can see is intentional. American Dream and Spider-Girl show up to confront Steel Spider. They have a whole thing. They confront the Serpent Society or whatever, and they basically show this guy that he can do it. The whole issue becomes about like believing in yourself. And obviously for May, that's important right now because she doesn't have her powers and she's trying to figure it all out. It's all right there, what they're trying to do. They're showing me too many other interesting things that I want to focus on for them to also be adding in stuff that I don't care about at all and giving it so much page time.
Like, I don't know if you caught it, but this is the second appearance of Jolt from A-Next #1.
Oh yeah, I did notice that. The flashback where it's Steel Spider who's looking real trim comparatively.
Yeah, he's looking like fucking Black Tarantula.
You got Nova, Jolt, Speedball, and Jubilee. It's some, Avengers type analog, kind of close to the one we saw in the first issue of A-Next. But I don't care about this guy's background. That weird thing with his fucking hot wife that leaves him. I don't care about any of that.
Yeah, I'm really disgusted by the amount of stuff that's like, I got a hottie.
Yeah.
It's never pointed out that that's bad.
Yep, that your superheroics have reached their pinnacle when a hot woman decides that she wants to be with you.
And we get the Soldiers of the Serpent, just like you said. They're so forgettable. They don't matter. And American Dream and Spider-Girl are having it tough when Steel Spider jumps in and is part of the team. It just winds up feeling like this issue, if Steel Spider Spider were to show up in the next 2 volumes, I would be really, really excited. Because this could go somewhere. He could be a guy who could put Phil to shame. My life also sucks, but I'm making something of it. But instead, he just, okay, bye.
No, because it's not about him. It's about May believing in herself, which again, completely fine, but it's this whole no powers arc and figuring that out that is going on too long and that isn't really doing a lot of internal reflection. We're just doing a lot of after school special moments to sort of cap it off and have her be like, maybe I really can do it.
All right. One of the things that's so frustrating that I think we have to address is nearly here.
Mm-hmm.
I think this really is so far the high point of what the fuck are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say I love this costume.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really cool take on that costume.
Mm-hmm.
The symbol is attractive. I'm a big fan of, fine, we'll just say it's a fucking another Spider-Man.
There's Spider-Man, guys. Spider-Man's back.
Amazing Spider-Man joins the cast of Spider-Girl. Oh my God.
By confronting J. Jonah Jameson and Peter Parker. So right off the bat, we know it's not Peter.
Yeah, this really frustrated me because I want to like this Spider Kid. I do. I really want to like him, but just like the title of the issue says, too many spiders. I can't do it. It's really hard.
From a timing perspective, there is always the thing, we've been saying it since volume 1, which is too many people, adding in another spider person on top of being a new character, just adding in a new character is not great. Adding in another spider person, we had Steel Spider in the same issue, didn't need another spider person. The bigger thing, I could have bought it, this actually, in the grand scheme of legacy and mythos and characters that are attached to the spider name, all of it works in theory. The problem is, we are still not done with the fucking no power storyline. Resolve that first, and then maybe we dip into something else. The fact that this overlaps is not a good use of narrative pacing in space.
But we're also barely done with the other characters in this vein.
Right.
I still feel like I don't understand exactly who the Buzz is.
Yep.
I don't understand what Dark Devil is still doing here.
Yep.
Wasn't Kane still running around at one point? Didn't we find out that Riley Tyne works for Nelson and Murdoch, and then that does come up, but there wasn't room for this character on top of all of this other stuff. And for a world that started out that was very, what's a Spider Girl, whatever, all of a sudden all these people talk about are Spider characters.
Yeah, and start playing favorites, and it wasn't the time.
And we're at issue 33, and I think that we've had Spider-Girl not have powers for 8 months. And this issue does see her get her powers back. It is so underwhelming when it happens. I had to read it twice to catch it.
Yep.
It is such a weird, forgettable setup and execution on this whole issue. I think it is way too much time on characters that I don't care about because it's the human characters, and I do love her fighting Spider-Man, but she's already fought the Spider-Man. I don't know. This could have been cooler. It's another too many things.
Yeah. For me, the real big takeaway is the moment between Normie and Riley Tyne.
Absolutely.
That's where things start to get really exciting because we know Riley Tyne is Dark Devil.
Right.
It becomes equally exciting because Dark Devil shows up later in the issue to get in between the spite between Spider-Girl and Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man. Seeing him in this moment where he's interacting with Normie, where he's totally normal and there's nothing insidious and you wouldn't even question why he was there, and then getting the reminder that this is Dark Devil, it all works, giving Normie a broader connection to the universe that both makes him important to things that Spider-Girl is concerned about, but also kind of gives him his own impetus to act and his own interactions with people. It's 3 panels, but I was really excited about it.
Yeah, and Normie has become so hot.
Yeah, I was laughing at those tattoos, but now I'm kind of into it.
Yeah, I'm really into it. I hate it. I'm so into it. And oh man, there are a few too many pop culture culture references in this volume.
Yeah, not good XFL style really did hurt me as a human being.
Especially after like the WB drama comment. There's a few too many pop culture references that just aren't flying for me the way I want them to. I also think Moose cannot possibly be at training unless this Spider-Man has been around for like 3 months. So time is moving way too fast for poor broken leg Moose. And, there's just a weird sense of it's hard to take a lot of this seriously because they're trying to play against different elements of, I don't know. It really does feel like, what do you mean her powers are back out of nowhere? Your powers, they finally returned. You don't know how or why, but they're a little different. And I like a lot of it. Yeah. I just wish it felt like the book was given the chance to like itself.
Yeah, the payoff for the powers thing, like I wanted, an Avatar Aang hits his back on the rock and finally like jumpstarts his chakras again. Huge moment, because this has been going on for so long. And again, it's the internality of what this means for May just still never really hits. And so it's just like, again, it's this external foe. It just becomes about this fight, and the return of the powers is not, some kind of her resolving things in her head or having this miracle moment that finally gets her to a place she needs to be. It's just this thing that happens that for plot reasons means she wins the fight.
But even then, she doesn't exactly win the fight.
No,
she
needs help from
Dark Devil.
Yeah.
All said and done, the Dark Devil appearance is disappointing because it had such interesting chemistry early on that it feels like there's no chemistry here. And I want the book to either stick to its early guns or become something new, but this hopping in the middle isn't really going where I need it to drive the book anywhere exciting. The characters all feel kind of stuck in a pattern, and adding this Spider-Man is a lot of fun in concept, but the way it's being executed feels really weird, especially because the misleads don't come together right. He actually doesn't really have his mother's super hardcore go for it blessing ultimately. So what the fuck is this exchange at the end of the issue?
It's there to make us be like, oh, it's like a kid who's got a mom who knows what's the mystery here. But once it pays off, it doesn't really make any sense that this scene happens the way it does.
And they introduce so many moms. This is just too many moms. I love moms.
But and then the problem is they introduce another kid. Maybe it's a red herring, but then the mention of that other son has not paid off so far in what I've read. So it's a lot of misdirects. And again, I feel like they're like, we gotcha. And I'm like, right, but I didn't care. You didn't need to get me. I just wanted you to like do some cool character development between some of the interesting characters that you have already.
All said and done, I think I give this volume like a B. Maybe it's just like a Spider-Girl settled into its kind of general place and there's nothing egregious here. But I think I give Too Many Spiders a B. It just feels like more par for the Spider-Girl course. And I am very into how ridiculous this book is getting. And, it's working for me, but that so many of the stories that we're working on right now kind of just stop as they happen is so frustrating.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of the height of that grade is coming from the really great moments between like her and Normie and Mary Jane, the broader idea that this universe is starting to take shape a bit and might really be an important part of it. That's all really great for me. The reason it's not higher, and like there's so many moments where you're like, this could be a comic book Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like this could be really good. It's the bad dialogue and the relationships we don't care about. Too many things happening and too many people that really are getting in the way of this story reaching like epic proportions that are clearly there.
Spider-Girl 34 starts out with what might be the most pleasant appearance of the Fantastic Five ever. I don't know. It was pretty harmless and Johnny's looking hot. And, it's such an interesting issue because the conceit of this issue ultimately makes May seem kind of foolish in a way that is a lesson she needed to learn.
Yeah, I think the idea that the Fantastic Five are on this kind of other level, not that they're even more important, but that they're just doing different things that May can't necessarily participate in. And like Peter gets that. Peter gets who the Fantastic Five are, what they do. You know, Peter probably would not ask to join along in the same way that May does in this issue. May is young. She thinks she can do anything. That's a very teenage thing. So when the Fantastic Five reports that they are getting, you know, a signal from outer space and they need to go out and, you know, and fight, May thinks, oh, let me come along. And she is immediately shot down in a way that you can recognize as Johnny Storm trying to like be diplomatic, but really just ultimately say like, no, you couldn't hang with us. And yeah, May needs to hear that.
Especially because she just got her powers back. Like
Right.
literally, she was there getting her powers tested. How can you think that you're ready for your first space mission when you just yesterday got your powers back?
Yeah, I think it's one of those moments of character growth that's the type of stuff I want to see from her. I want to see her think she can do it and then not get like the little boost from helping, you know, chubby Steel Spider do it, but have Johnny Storm and the guy that she has a crush on, Psylord, be like, no, you cannot.
Yeah. And speaking of Psylord, it was interesting seeing Big Brain in that horrifying little body. The art on him is getting much more terrifying. Thanks, guys. And, you know, Ms. Fantastic is just not interesting. I feel bad. I want to like her, but she only ever seems to download me file folders.
Yeah, she's nobody. They have not given her any characterization. She often is like just not there. Like the other characters from the Fantastic Five will show up and somebody will be like, should we call Miss Fantastic? And they'll be like, no, she's doing something, so she can't show up. We now know that Reed and Sue exist and are still around in some capacity. Just bring them back. Like I don't care about these people.
And that May's powers have somehow changed. That now they seem to be some sort of biomagnetic, can make sticky things sticky energy-wise, I guess. Maybe it was to get her away from being sticky and like there was something maybe about that visual that just didn't work for them. I don't know. But changing her powers, this can't be what this was all for, right?
Yeah, that was my initial thought. And I didn't need it. She's Spider-Girl. She inherited her powers from her dad, and she is now a teenager doing the same thing that he did, but it's a different world, so things are different. That's all I need to see.
Speaking of different world, I don't care for this Ralphie character. He is very useless. He is very pointless. I enjoy seeing Richie in the background. That was a really nice surprise. That Mayday is like, so when I heard that there was something like an alien, I was like, oh wait, maybe they're going to give her her own symbiote story, even though we already saw Venom, who we haven't seen Venom in like 30 issues. So like really nice job not abusing that idea. So I'm like, maybe this is going to be her symbiote. And you know, when it turns out it's ultimately nothing, okay. But that Davida is like, who cares if the world is going to end? Shoes are on sale. That makes Davida seem so stupid.
Yeah. And again, she is not a friend for the person who wants to be Spider-Girl. Spider-Girl's got other stuff. Spider-Girl's worried about that.
And there isn't enough for me with these characters that when Nancy Lou was like, oh, I'd love to come. Wait, why? Who is this woman? Why is she here? What purpose does she add? Like, there's too many people who want to fuck too many of the same people already, that adding Nancy Lou, who is like just a drive-by character in terms of they bring her in, they fuck her up, and then they kick her to the side. It's just really weird.
You know, she is a mutant. There's potential there. This could be a high schooler who gets it, but that's not what's happening. It's just, I guess, there to show May that she can like someone that is involved in her interpersonal drama, which I don't know that that's the lesson that she needs, especially when we're having her get this lesson of like, even when you have your powers and you're on your game, you're not necessarily ready for a certain type of league. That's a cool lesson that I'm already invested in. I didn't really need the much less important lesson of like, when you treat a guy like crap and he moves on, be nice to his new girlfriend.
Yeah, we kind of get a lot of that lesson from Amazing Spider-Man, the young new guy. Like, he's not really ready to hang. So like, we do get a sense of the outsider syndrome, and we could be getting an interesting parallel of it, you know, comparing the outsider syndrome May experiences in her own life to the outsider syndrome that this Spider-Man is experiencing. But instead, we just get a lot of really irritating characters that act like children. And we get Courtney. I don't know. I don't understand Courtney being here. I don't know who she's supposed to be. I don't understand why Courtney wants May to help train Moose. That's really inappropriate. Like, she's gonna fucking hurt this guy. There's no chance Courtney thinks thinks that Mayday can bench the same amount as Moose, you know?
And like was angry 2 issues ago that May didn't show up for his football game or like to go visit him when he broke his leg, whatever. I can't imagine why this is here.
I agree. And where we wind up with Coach Thompson being like, have you had your first lesbian experience with Nancy Lou yet? I just really, it's getting to be too much. And I think the Mr. Nobody stuff that starts popping up here as well is some of the least continuity based stuff. I can never figure out what's going on with Mr. Nobody. He works with everybody, but also always for the Kingpin.
Yeah, I mean, that literally is it. He is most loyal to the Kingpin, but then he's also always working for everybody else. For the most part, it just gets used as a plot device. Within this story that's going to manifest, it will eventually turn out that he is like double agenting and whatever, but it takes a while for you to understand that that's what's happening because he has just shown up working for whoever, not in a way that is relevant to the fact that he is like double crossing for the Kingpin, just like because they want to have him and use him. So when it turns out that what he's doing is kind of a double cross for the Kingpin, it takes a lot longer to make sense than it ought to because he just hasn't been used consistently.
Yeah, and because I don't really get a sense of who he is as a character, that, you know, because this is the character from issue 8, you know, this guy has just been laying low in the background this whole time. I wonder if they thought that he would become more and more interesting, like as he continued to appear, that we would be drawn further into his narrative. But mostly, I just find myself uninterested by the fight. You know, I love the team up. I love how many of these super cool characters show up here, but I find that Mr. Nobody being able to take on all of these characters makes them all seem pretty weak.
Yeah, it's just kind of a big old messy hodgepodge. Feels like it has a lot more to do with writer problems than it does with kind of any intentionality in the story. This is going to be a long-term story. You know, the fact that we're still dealing with this Raptor facing justice for being a criminal, Riley Tyne being her lawyer, Normie being a go-between for them, May being Raptor's friend, all these people showing up, that's all great. It's like solid continuity book to book that keeps me interested in the story. It's just like these big moments around which that continuity turns that sometimes if the villain isn't right and kind of my understanding of the story isn't really very solid, that these moments don't land quite the way they're supposed to. And this is one of those. It's really cool to see all these people on stage or on panel together, but it just, I don't really get what the point of this fight was. I don't get Mr. Nobody's motivations. And so parts of it really work and parts of it really don't, is what it comes down to.
I do love that you said on stage though, because it feels to me like this is an example of too many musicians, right? Like people are always like, oh man, if all those singers came together or all those actors were in the same movie, it would automatically be great.
Yeah.
No, because sometimes it's too much, you know, like big hero energy.
It's also extremely weird that nobody notices that Riley Tyne has disappeared and Dark Devil has shown up.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're too busy not noticing it when Mayday does it.
That's true.
And the whole Courtney is Spider-Girl thing just getting dropped as hard as it did, that never comes up here, that like, there's so many things that we spent so many issues thinking were such a big deal. Will she or won't she with Brad? Other people talk more about her and Brad than she talks about Brad.
Yep.
I don't know the last time Mayday and Brad shared panel space. It just feels like everything that was important just isn't even getting brought up anymore, yet there's room for Funny Face to come back. And now he has a dog bad guy with him, Canis. Yeah. You know, issue 35 starts some of the best storytelling and also some of the worst storytelling. And it's because the two sides of this story are so unsynced. I don't think you can justify the high school stuff coexisting in the same book that has what's going to eventually be an incredibly powerful Funny Face Crazy Eights plot.
Yeah, I think that's correct. The entire arc is going to happen and we're not going to see any movement in terms of the high school characters integrating into May's superhero life. It gets harder and harder to care every time.
And there's weird things that connect between the two sides that I'm like, one makes the other seem sillier. But in the middle of all of this, Heather throws a ball at Courtney in the head because she wants to hit May. Like the level of drama that that's getting mixed here is making all of it less effective.
Yeah, except for May and Normie.
May and Normie, I really, man.
Will they, won't they?
I want them to.
I know. I'm here for it. I'm compelled. This issue features not the last panel of them looking longingly into each other's eyes with not a single word or thought bubble or narration of any kind, just about to kiss, and then they turn away because they're not there yet. And every time I live for it.
Yeah. And one of the things that makes it so good is that he knows what it would take to be a superhero and knows what this life would mean, knows the fear, knows what he's committing to, but is fine with it. Like, that's the kind of wholehearted acceptance and love we want for her that we feel like her high school classmates can't ever give her. That's why we don't want her in those storylines.
And I did with JJ, and it just like the opportunity got lost and it's still not happening. So I don't care. And we've got Normie. And now the thing that I'm finding that I really love about her and Normie is this idea that like Normie wants to be the guy in the chair for her and the state. He's not trying to be a superhero, and he has no insecurities about the fact that May does it. I mean, he's helping Phil do it, which sucks, but whatever. You know, like I love the idea that he knows that he can't do this. He does not feel impotent because of it. He's not jealous. He just wants to do his best, and he likes this girl and wants to support her.
And one of the things that makes that so human is we remember where he started in Spider-Girl Zero. He was the big bad goblin.
Yeah.
And this idea that who he was a construct created for him by other people, and May could see the real him, that's the kind of thing that makes that really believable. Like, she's the one who cut through the bullshit and helped him feel like a man, helped him feel like a real person. And so he'll always have that special place in his heart for her. I think that is such a realistic element. And speaking of realistic elements, the gunplay stuff just does not work for me here. I am a really big proponent of keeping guns out of superhero comics where possible, because I don't think they fit into the storytelling vigilante world that, you know, they're portraying there. It's not the same kind of world. It's not the same kind of ordinance. So Mayday being like, I got really scared of a gun. Girl, you fly out of the way of laser beams. Like, and I'm not trying to, you know, oh my God, guns, but like a laser beam would literally kill you faster. So
yeah, and we got Funny Face here with his like insane wand Bunky that can do laser beams and smoke bombs and everything else. There's no point in being afraid of a gun at that point.
Yeah, all that this is, it was just creating a situation where her friends would be in the same location as a gun.
Right.
To create fear for us. Although, you know, the whole idea that Jimmy Yama is going to start having a weird affair with Heather is, I don't know. We're told Jimmy is the moral center, and he already went through it. I'm a machismo jerk story. So why is he having another I'm a machismo jerk over women story?
Yeah, I have no idea. And I don't care. No matter what, I wouldn't care, because this has nothing to do with anything. This does not affect May. Jimmy is always like, he's another one where I'm like, the Yama name is so important to MC2. Why is Jimmy Yama not doing more? Why is Jimmy Yama not a superhero of some kind? Why is he carrying on an affair at the age of 16?
Yeah. And it's one of those, like, she's clearly into him and they're making out in public. So I don't know.
It's so weird.
It's so weird. It's very big dick energy from this kid. Like, he really serves it up big. He really does. And it's not likable.
No. And it just doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Yeah, because these are his friends. Going behind his friend's back in a weird way. I don't know. And the idea that these concerns in a world where Funny Face and Bunky are like laser blasting people and blowing shit up, and Canis is going to like try and feed May to his dogs. The idea that she scuffed her new fucking boots is the worst thing that happened to her today.
What a frustrating day.
I was a real jerk.
Oh my God.
What are we supposed to do with that?
What are we supposed to do with it?
And then, you know, we're supposed to think that Normie is stalking May, but we see Normie get stalked here, so we have to know that Normie can't be the stalker.
Yeah, again, it's just like what's the mystery? And it's like, you don't need to set up a mystery for me, guys. Like, I've never read an issue of this and been like, it's missing some mystery, though. Like, I wish I was left in suspense about who somebody was. Like,
I only wish I didn't know something.
Right, exactly. I've just never needed that. And every time you do it, you don't really set it up well. So it never pays off and it's always just confusing. Please stop.
And there's so many ridiculous stories that it really makes when a serious story happens so more powerful. Like when Mary Jane is diagnosed with falls down disease and she just can't stop falling down. It's just, she's got falls down disease and it's really dangerous.
But immediately what falls down disease is a symptom of.
Yeah, she is definitely problem pregnant. That's right. The only kind of pregnancy in a comic book, a dangerous, problematic pregnancy that is, because this comic is from the point of view of a man. Even when a man has lost a child via, that sort of through, his wife or his girlfriend or anything like that, it's not the same thing as the firsthand experience of a woman relaying that. And we've seen it done in comics so many times that I'm already at kind of like an eye roll before it even starts.
And then it's Mary Jane, who is just such a badass and has not had a moment to shine in a way. As soon as this happened, the thing that annoyed me was everything we're talking about, which is just that it's not really a man's story to tell. It's super duper obvious. It's really tropey, but also the idea that Mary Jane could be like, I'm having another fucking baby. Like, I'm having a spider baby. I don't give a shit. We're doing this is so much more interesting to me. And there's already tons of consequences in this book. I did not need the stakes of a delicate pregnancy. I just didn't need it at all. I would so much more love, the stakes of Mary Jane don't give a fuck.
Yeah, 1000%. And you know what I don't give a fuck about? I don't give a fuck about what Mayday thinks about her friends cheating.
Yep.
I don't.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean anything.
Like, stay in your lane. Mind your fucking business and swing on to the next building.
There's a moment coming up later, I think it's in the next issue or the issue after, where Courtney tries to be like, hey, we got to deal with this Jimmy Yama and Heather cheating on Brad. And she goes, no, I don't think we need to deal with that. Mind your own business. And it's almost worth it for that moment. If that moment meant something and was a greater message in this book of how the high school drama doesn't actually matter to May, if that was the thing that took her to the level of being like, oh, I don't actually give a fuck about any of these people, I would have lived for it. But it's just one offhand moment that I really enjoy that doesn't actually go anywhere. But she is correct. None of this matters. Mind your fucking business. Everybody do your own thing and let May be Spider-Girl.
Because that is exactly what is highlighted by the Normie scene. When Normie's like,
did I mention Raptor called?
And she's like, what? And he's like,
did I mention Raptor called?
And she's like, oh, why? And he's like,
she wants to eat with me.
And she's like, are you guys gonna eat together? And he's like, why? It could be fun. Whatever. It is the first time I hate their dialogue in a really, really long time, but I schmoop for it so hard because I love seeing somebody that makes her feel that way.
Yep. And especially that it's her friend and that because this is her real life as Spider-Girl, she's not going to do the dumb shit that she does during her fake high school life where she's not really sure if she likes the person or not. She already knows that she really likes Raptor and she's rooting for Raptor and she wants to be friends with Raptor and she's also in love with Normie. So the conflict is there and she's not going to behave like an asshole. She's just not going to know what to do and is going to feel sad that she's confused about it, which is so much more what I want rather than her treating Nancy like shit for no reason because Nancy's with a guy that she doesn't even care about.
Truly, it really makes May seem less than. When May has these bigger than life concerns and everything in her world just becomes shitty little infighting, it really makes May seem less than. I have no use for Kingpin here. I'm a big Kingpin fan. This is Spider-Man Kingpin. This is not Daredevil Kingpin. He's just like a lead bad guy. I don't even know why we cut back.
Yeah, I agree on every level. I think it's just because he's recognizable and you're supposed to, realize that this is a crime families of the MC2 universe type thing. But it's nothing. Here we go.
And we get sad Muppet Spider-Boy. And he comes back and falls right into an obvious trap because he's a dumb fuck. And Spider-Girl, okay, so here's what made me want to throw my fucking folding chair through a goddamn window. What do you mean Spider-Girl isn't excited about being a sister? She is the best big sister to the Buzz, to Raptor, to this spider fuck. She is the best big sister. What do you mean she's not excited about having a little brother or little sister? That's weird to me. That's not in May's personality.
No, and I think think it goes along with the delicate pregnancy. Like, the women are right the fuck on board. I like the idea that Peter would be like, I'm scared because if we have another child, they might also have spider powers, and then what do I do? But Mary Jane and May are immediately like, we fucking got this. Whoever this kid is, we're gonna love the shit out of it. And like, even to see her be like, I now have even more of a mission because I have to make this world safer for the sibling that I'm about to have. That's a good fucking story, and that's a May I fully believe is there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that the sort of ongoing nature of the story, paralleling her and Amazing Spider-Man, and also in a lot of ways Crazy 8 with Funny Face, is really interesting. These two very similar characters. One has to protect the other because the other doesn't know what they're doing. You know, I can't believe it, but I started putting in my notes at this point, wow, Crazy 8 really cares about Funny Face. Like, you can really see what an actual caring, good brother he is at this point in the series. And that really shocked me, especially because one of the things that I'm really coming to notice is DeFalco does all the work of setting up so many great metaphors and then just forgets to pay them off.
Yep.
They're there, but he just doesn't finish it.
Yep.
Instead, we get more end cliffhanger stuff that just doesn't do anything for anybody. Nobody thinks that Normie is about to turn on May. No one thinks that's going to happen.
Exactly. And as soon as Felicia shows up, we know it's going to be tied into all this stuff with Amazing Spider-Man. And it ends up not being as straightforward as you think it is, but just the idea that you would play it off as like, oh, she just walked in, like, rather than this is a really significant Spider-Man person that has shown back up, and like, let's take a moment to acknowledge that. It's just a wasted opportunity.
It really is. It's a super wasted opportunity, in part because one of the things that I think that we get too many of are these over and over again, flash in the pan, red herrings, where there's a little too much chaos that doesn't really make me feel like the story is moving anywhere organic.
Yep.
You know, I'm returning the Green Goblin. You keep this going for way too long.
Yep.
You keep it going for way too long because none of us think that's what's going to happen. And Mary Jane still has falls down disease. I don't know. The whole thing is just really stretching my ability to want to see it. I'm happy it's here, but I wish we could have gotten here better.
Yeah, and faster, and that the writing and editing team could have seen that as soon as the first stone is laid, we're already there. You're not really taking us on a journey by adding more steps to it. They're just kind of filler. And as soon as Mary Jane falls down, she's already pregnant. Like, just start with that. As soon as that happens, the next reveal within the same issue is she's pregnant. We don't need to drag this on. It's not doing anything for us. When Felicia shows up, let's move right to what that means. We don't need to do little mysteries about it.
Maybe the one that doesn't bother me is the way Funny Face and Crazy 8's story drags out a little bit, because honestly, the payoff there is really worth it, but it makes me wonder why we had to go this long route on so many of these stories. If the problem was that people weren't connecting with the material, why were you just adding more things not to connect with instead of refocusing the book in a clearer way?
Right.
Because by the time Felicity Hardy joins looking like fucking Heather Locklear dressed like Buffy, it's just so awkward.
Despite the fact that she is 13 years old, why is she at a high school?
In a belly shirt with her dad. Like, I don't know. I think that she could be an interesting character.
Yeah.
But we don't really get there. And it's bogged down in all of this. Mary Jane not feeling well. Felicia not having much of a personality, just being very friendly. Put upon Peter. I don't know. Add in this whole relationship between Raptor and Normie, where we were told, you know, Raptor's got a fake real life, and now she's just out and about with a known psychopath.
Who is maybe going back to his psychopathic ways, but we clearly know that he's not, and we're just waiting for that to wrap itself up immediately because we weren't interested when it started.
And we get, like you mentioned, that how's your son? Oh. Which, again, meant to make us think that he's going to be, you know, the new Spider-Man is going to be Felicia's kid. Maybe that Felicia had a kid with Peter, something like that. But then we get what can only be described as the first of way too many Spider-Women.
Yeah.
I'm Julia Carpenter. I don't recognize you. Well, there's something familiar about your voice. I was Spider-Woman. We need to talk about Spider-Man. What? Why? This is
Why?
so... Why? This is what? What is happening? And like, it's so weird how the book seems to think that we'll just go, oh, spider people. Okay. But I don't just go, spider people. Okay. I go, there's too many people in this fucking book. No.
And if we're gonna do it, you have the original Madam Web show up in that giant fucking web throne that she walked around in, blind as fuck, just calling out prophecies about who the new Spider-Man is. Do not give me Julia Carpenter.
And then, like, to jump ahead just a little bit, but then it's not even like Julia Carpenter's kid.
It's not. Julia Carpenter is just there to shepherd us to the final destination that we just should have started at immediately 3 issues ago.
The next Spider-Girl.
And it's so weird because we're not that far away from New Avengers, where Jessica Drew is finally going to get her moment, and then it kind of gets taken back because it ultimately ends up being a Skrull. But it's so weird to get this Jessica Drew, who is based on basically nothing and nobody, nobody has any real connection to the Jessica Drew that Tom DeFalco is kind of basing this alternate later version of her on. And then it's her kid that is the new Spider-Man that's been running around.
So it's Julia Carpenter showing up to tell us that it's Jessica Drew's kid, when those are basically the 2 Spider-Women that had no relationship with Spider-Man, though she does name drop those Spider-Men. In the middle of all of this, Green Goblin has shown up to the Crazy 8 funny-faced Spider-Girl fight, and are we supposed to think he's going to turn on Spider-Girl at any point here?
I think they were like, oh, we're leaving him in suspense with this one. They're really going to think he's coming to fuck May up.
No, I don't even think that Crazy 8s is here to fuck May up. I just don't.
Yeah,
I don't.
And then on top of that, like, spoiler alert, it's not fucking Normie. So there's another wrinkle that's added to the whole thing. And that, by the way, like, the suspense of did Green Goblin just show up to kill May? Not actually the last page. We get one more having to do with Mary Jane and her hysterical pregnancy, additional storyline that and don't forget, Felicia Hardy is still in the mix with a daughter, so that's there too. And the high school drama is still happening sometimes. This is all in one book at one time, and you're supposed to like connect with all of it.
Because this definitely starts to read like they realized they needed to close out the arc.
Yeah.
I think that they started to see that they've been masterminding these bigger and bigger arcs as they've been going. And, this is the first time that I think an opening fight sequence goes on quite as long as it does. We don't get the Phil Normie reveal till page 10 of the digital, which that's pretty far into this book for that fight sequence to kind of clear up. It sort of just kind of comes to a stop. We get a little bit about the new Spider-Man. We get a little bit about Mary Jane having a kid. We get a little bit more about the Heather and Jimmy stuff. But this really feels like they got a note that was like, you need to close out all of this stuff. The next volume needs to start a little bit cleaner, a little bit clearer. It needs to have a few more organization points for fans to jump in and out at, because this is the only book in this universe. There's no other way to get into it. You have to have read everything before it, and everything is opening up in the air.
Yeah, they are starting to close stuff out. Like, we do immediately get that the Green Goblin that is there to help, not to hurt May. And then we find out that it's Phil. And then there's just this horrible panel of Normie and Phil like nerd broing out about being Green Goblin that makes me hate them both.
So much.
We're good there. Now we got a good Green Goblin. We know the reveal about Mary Jane being pregnant comes out. Those are really the only 2 that we close out for sure. Like, we still have a bunch more to deal with. So point being, they are definitely starting, but there is so much going on that we still got a lot to resolve to get through everything that has been set up over the last few issues.
And speaking of things set up over the last few issues, I want to make a point. When Mary Jane finally says, I'm going to have another baby on page 14, that's the same shirt and the same pose as my boobs are this far apart.
Yeah, she seems to have a superpower where she can just kind of spread her body in a weird way, and I don't know what she can do with that, but I'm rooting for her as a superhero.
It seems to involve this same green shirt all the time.
That's giving her the power.
Oh, I hope. I also don't get the Stinger mainframe appearance at the end of this issue.
No.
Like, the end of this issue is bizarre.
Yeah.
Everything about the end of this issue is weird. Her watching Latinos playing chess in the park. Then she's just staring at this woman with a bunch of dogs. Does she think this woman is Canis?
I was like, that's a weird like Canis reference. Yeah.
But then it's still a Spider-Girl world. And I want to be like, is it? Was it ever? Because you're like, it's still a Spider-Girl world. And, you know, this whole thing where Stinger is like, don't go in there unless you want to get arrested for assault and criminal trespassing. Knowing isn't proving. Hate to break it to you, girlfriend. Nobody said life was fair. Bye. Injustice. What a callous thing to be callous about.
Oh my god, that's our Stinger. That's the one. That's her.
That's our Stinger. Yeah, it really is. I don't know. Is this supposed to just be like Spider-Girl swinging through her neighborhood? Since when does she live near a flea market and a bodega? Like, I don't understand what version of Spider-Girl's life this is highlighting, but this last page with this weird cover color mock-up, and there is something so not the same about this book since they very clearly put an editor on DeFalco, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but it clearly came when the book was already doing its own thing, and that nobody seemed to have helped the book make that move, and instead just sort of started pivoting away from the stories we'd been reading is really tricky.
Yeah, I think the one big thing that the editor did was really help tamp down on some of the getting into offensive territory, things that were going on in the writing where, you know, I think we all have the tendency to do it. It's not a thing where your first idea, you should be punished for it. And you yourself can admit with hindsight that it should not be published. But without a third party there to show up and be like, rethink it, you know, clearly it can get through and get onto the page. And I think that was something that we saw happen a bunch before there was an editor. We're seeing a lot less of that. We instead, I think, are getting a lot more of that repeated idea of like, we're giving you more for your money. Like, we're trying to get all the value out of this book that we can, which means more stuff, more stuff, more stuff. Or like, let us give you an iconic image of Spider-Girl that really reminds you that this is a superhero. But like, God, I love May. I root for her. It is not a Spider-Girl world. She is a hot mess. She has no control over anything. She is not feeling loose and slamming heat all the time. She is just a fucking wreck. It's never been a Spider-Girl world, and that's one of the things that's great about her, but that's also one of the things that when you have a panel like this, it just isn't representative of what this book is.
Because it makes it really hard to understand what we're supposed to be getting from May. That's one of the things that I'm struggling with. I want to see this character succeed, but I feel oftentimes like that's at odds with what the writers want for May. I think they want to keep seeing her be tested, but that's making supporting her occasionally very difficult. So, all right, I almost think that the cover to number 39 is kind of misleading in a funny way. Like, not really. It's not that it's photorealistic in any given way that matters, though I do feel like the eyes are a little bit more Grendel than Spider-Person. But, like, number 39, I feel like this is a point at which I really just want to point out that the covers don't want anything to do with MC2 anymore. They don't want it to look like Spider-Girl when she began. This really is just new era girl Spider-Person.
And this cover in particular, with its like digital animation background, really gives the idea that they are trying to sell you a new Fox animated Sunday morning or Saturday morning cartoon, which is not what we're getting, but I really appreciate the further efforts to be like, hey kids, give it a try.
Yeah, because at this point, more than ever, I feel like Spider-Girl is no longer accessible. And not even in a mean way, not like there's something so wrong with her or anything, but the book that they're crafting and the book that's coming out is certainly not a book that feels to me like anybody can jump in, feel comfortable with these characters, have a fundamental understanding of what the Marvel Universe is. It just feels so exclusive to a generation who I don't know are still actively reading new books.
Our discussion earlier about the sales numbers really bears that out. But, that's not something that's uncommon with any particular Marvel title. There are big eras in which I have told many people who know that I love the X-Men, like, this is not a good time to jump on. If you really want to do it, you're going to have to go back. I used to say, like, you're going to have to go back to Morrison and, like, work your way up, because jumping on the Decimation's just kind of not going to get you going. Now people can jump on with Hoxpox, but we're getting to a point even where we're years into that, and it's a lot of background reading, and you kind of can't jump in now. So, it's not the worst thing that May is no longer accessible. It does kind of speak to a lot of character development. It completely has moved away from the initial mission of MC2, and if that's the case, it feels like the story is better off changing in bigger ways, and we've got an issue coming up that really shows that some big changes could have done really great things for this book and this character. It remains basically as it is, which means it's just kind of difficult to be accessible, and it's going to stay that way. Therefore, the audience is never really going to grow. It's going to have its diehards, but that's where it will stay.
Because what this book is becoming is more and more these tight little moments, but they're not always painting a bigger picture, which is part of my frustration. That 3-page opening fight between Spider-Man and Spider-Girl, it doesn't advance the characters. It just makes the kid Spider-Man seem more petulant, and I don't need him to be like Peter Parker levels of cool, but he's definitely not coming off like Peter Parker levels of anything. Not that I had ever thought that this Spider-Man was going to be a time-displaced Amazing Spider-Kid, but like this character, especially when you have the inheritor of Spider-Man as a comparative point, if I were like buying this book and I'm like, oh, it's Spider-Girl, and she's teaming up with a Spider-Man who's not Spider-Man and isn't related to Spider-Man, and she doesn't know who he is. What?
Yeah, and the choice to just make him really bratty and whiny, but then not to use that as some way, again, to kind of reflect on May. Like, just throughout this time, we're not really getting enough reflection on who May is and what's important to her, and having that sort of turn stories and grow the character. It happened all throughout the storyline where she was powerless. It just continued to happen, but there was no reflection. And we get the same thing with this Spider, who is really Spider Boy, and that might have been even that little name change, because he is a boy, and like it's just so clear that he's a kid. He's in over his head, and he's really dumb, and he whines, and he's annoying. And that, as compared to May, who has at times kind of seemed that way to us as readers, compared to the Spider-Man that we've known who is her father. She seems great compared to this new Spider-Man who is just a little idiot kid. That it just, there's no capitalization on it, so we just have this annoying extra character who whines and makes scenes more chaotic.
And it's all of this extra characterness that is what's making the book feel, at this point, maybe too busy for one title. I cannot possibly keep track of May and the secret other Spider-Man who has sort of a weird history and backstory, and then keep up with the double Goblin May stuff with a page of Mr. Nobody and Kingpin sandwiched in the middle, where Kingpin just comes off like some sort of weird taskmaster of a schedule or something. Don't just show up with important news. Only come when it's appropriate to come visit me in prison?
It sounds like he's saying, like, I could be jerking off in here. You really need to check with me first.
Oh, he's jerking off reading The Art of War, of course. Which, that's one of those things where, like, a sitcom character can be walking around with a copy of The Art of War, not the Kingpin in prison.
No.
That doesn't make him seem hardcore and edgy. It makes him seem like a bibliophile, not particularly threatening.
No, he's not doing anything. He is just in prison, and he's still got affairs, but, like, he can't really do anything with them. Doesn't seem like he has any plan to get out anytime soon.
No,
it's
why
just
would he?
kind of a stagnant thing.
He's doing great for himself in prison. It's one of the things that makes this book so weird is like the most annoying people wind up in the most convenient situations, like Kingpin, like Phil Urich, these guys who I'm like, the book might be better if you just weren't here anymore.
Yeah.
And then they represent these roles that I don't need them in.
Yeah.
Speaking of I just don't need it, the worst part of Normie is whenever he's around Phil and we're meant to believe he thinks Phil is cool.
Yes, it is not believable. They annoy me and make me sad. I don't want it.
Speaking of makes me sad, Jimmy Yama getting his rocks off with Heather, who's dating Brad Miller. And like, one of the things that's so annoying is everybody seems seems to think all things are equal, that he's like, yeah, well, you like JJ and he's dating Nancy Lou. So what if I like JJ? You're making out with Heather. Why is this a concern for a superhero?
Yep. And throwing Brad in the mix doesn't do anything. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Because I don't even want Brad in the mix.
Nope.
I have been so beyond Brad for so long now, he just doesn't feel necessary.
Yep.
And, it's some of these references, like talk about a Dawson's Creek moment. You know why that reference is unfortunately functional? Because if this were Riverdale or Euphoria, the reference would be like, everybody's fucking Peter. That would be the Euphoria moment.
Yep.
That would be the Riverdale moment. This is so tame. And they try to act like Mayday, who is bigger than life, larger than the world, fighting fucking aliens, can't get over this hang up. It really makes May seem small.
Yeah, when like her big interesting life is right there on the panel and we're into that, and all the writers have to do is be like, this is her real life and we're just going to cut the high school stuff out. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. And I think some of the high school stuff is what makes the, shouldn't you be hanging out with your friends? Why don't you call Davida? Why don't you go be a normal kid? Like, it makes Mary Jane seem completely divorced from the situation. She's a little bit played by Amy Poehler in Mean Girls here. She's not like a regular
mom.
super
She's a cool mom.
Oh, go hang out with your friends. Keeps me young. Like, what the fuck? Your daughter, who has humongous emotional problems, is like trying to communicate with you that she needs help, and you're just like not having it.
Which also, like, I mean, we just saw her hanging out with Nora. Like, she of all people is the one that I feel like would be like, you know what, May? Fuck your high school friends. They don't matter. You're a superhero. You should go be amongst your peers and don't worry about the bullshit. If you have to keep going to school because we can't fake it so that we don't get in trouble with the state for not sending you there, you have to keep going, but you don't have to care.
No, and especially not about these people. You can care about the situations you find yourself in, care about your grades, care about them on a human level, but that she's getting so involved in these petty drama schemes, it just makes the other stuff in the book feel like, then why? Why does it matter that life and death stakes if we can worry about Jimmy Yama getting his dick wet? Like, it really does, just because then we've got this severe thing with all of the Miss Spider girl women's. And, Julia Carpenter, who does not need to be here talking for Jessica Drew about Cassandra Webb and Maddie Franklin, like, not necessary. And we're so close to Aranya at this point. Obviously it's not like, oh, they should have predicted her, but like, it just feels like they went out of their way to mention a lot of Spider Women and it didn't mean anything.
No, because it's not like they're all coming in to be like, hey, we've also been Spider adjacent women, May, and we want to like show you the world. It just is this panel that shows up. I really love Cassandra Webb. I'm just living for that, but it doesn't matter. Again, it's not anything. It's not going to lead anywhere, even though I so just desperately want her to show up.
And it would maybe help us understand, like, maybe if there was a Destiny thing, like a bigger picture Destiny thing, instead of just more of these like cute little moments and like these... Because the JJ Ritchie moment, don't act like that's the same JJ that just like fucking went off on May in school.
Don't give us this taste of what it could be like for May to have a friend who knows, for her to have a boyfriend who knows, and for that boyfriend to have a friend, and for all of them. That, like, that's their little Scooby Gang right on the panel. And as soon as I see it, I'm like, give me this, give me anything but stupid high school stuff. And it just cuts out and we don't get this.
Because then when you've got, Captain Crazy Perm with Crazy Eights trying to make a deal with Canis, and like, we know that he is really in it for funny face and Mr. Nobody doesn't trust him. Again, it's the up and down of the drama that's making it so uneven.
The Crazy Eight funny face one is one of the more solid plot lines and stories and character beats where you're like, oh, these absolutely insane brothers who are really into crime actually really care about each other, and it's kind of screwing up the crime, but they're also really invested, so they got to figure that out, and it's, going to kind of come to a head with May. That's great. Like, it's a relatively unique story and it is compelling. That's the one, like, give us more of that. Give us less of JJ, Brad, Jimmy, Heather, whoever.
But if we don't have those characters, how will we find out all about the locker thief?
Oh God, fucking locker thief.
The fucking locker thief is kind of embarrassing, and it seems so small potatoes until the payoff at the end of the arc, which is kind of like an eye roll, but it's better than the number of times I feel like we get the Jessica Drew backstory. I don't understand. It it's the wrong Spider-Woman. Like, it's not Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. I understand it's Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. It's not really Jessica Drew Spider. This is 80s Jessica Drew Spider-Woman by way of 80s Julia Carpenter in a story that doesn't make any sense.
No, the explanations that are steps removed have to be repeated. The locker thief, it is yet again another moment where the first thing they try and get you to be like, oh, it's definitely Felicity Hardy because her mom was a thief and this is high school. And so, like, of course, she'd be the thief in high school. And you immediately are just like, no, I know it's going to be a fucking red herring because you guys keep doing this. And by the way, I didn't care in the first place. So can we just skip it? But we don't. We let it drag on for a while. And then we cut back to this Jessica Drew story that's being explained not by her and not in the presence of her or her child, who are the important characters, but just by Julia Carpenter while they take a walk.
And you just got to be like, Tom DeFalco, did you write Julia Carpenter once upon a time and you just want to see her get her due that she never got? Because I could even be okay with introducing other Spider-Women, but not just to talk about another Spider-Woman.
Yeah, put them in a costume, make them do stuff.
Because, you know, this is such a waste of Felicia in this segment as well. She's just kind of there in a way that doesn't make me feel anything successful. Like, you know, beyond the fact that this fill-in art kind of maybe has a little trouble with some of the likenesses, this does feel like a bit of a foreign issue.
It feels like one that it would have been better as like a bottle issue or just something that was its kind of cute own story rather than trying to just seamlessly pick up on what was already there, which is already too much. So to add such different art just makes it more chaotic and confusing.
Yeah, although it was kind of fun seeing Phil get just desserts. Like, yes. I don't want to see Phil get the shit kicked out of him, but Phil plays at a very dangerous game and is bound to get hurt at some point. And so him getting his ass kicked, you know, first of all, some of the giant band-aids they have him in at the end of the issue are like, these are just like dick length band-aids. This is amazing. But, you know, this whole issue rushes toward a weird conclusion where now that we know that Spider Kid has a disease, all of a sudden he's constantly in pain. And, you know, Nancy Lou, who was a totally normal human being till she met Mayday.
Yeah, I mean, you know, she was a mutant, but she was just trying to live her life. And then May just kept fucking poking at the whole situation, exposed her, and then fake became her friend, but real became her friend, but now they're rival. It's just like, I was kind of excited when she used her powers to throw May into the locker, because I was like, this is, again, like we are touching on the thing that matters, which is the superpowers, which is what everybody cares about, but no dice, it's not going anywhere. She's not like getting into a costume. Nancy Lou is not getting into a costume and becoming an antagonist. She just like had a little moment and it's part of the high school stuff. It's not part of anything else.
Especially with the next issue being as like packs a punch as it is, you know, with Mary Jane injured and Bill injured, Spider-Girl only having recently gotten her powers back, Spider-Boy being on death's door since before we met him, and then all of the cheaters. It feels perhaps like when the next issue is called Death Without Warning and the front page says Death in the Family, that, you know, anybody could die. But this issue takes on a really interesting turn. One of the things they spend way too long doing is listing every plot every couple of pages. We get the Phil's injured, we get May is sick, we get Courtney and Moose. Like, they're just checking off the stories for us.
We fully repeat the Jessica Drew child backstory, which we just saw at the end of the last issue. We just repeat it again.
Yeah, almost like maybe because the original creative team didn't get to draw it, they decided to put something, like, I don't know. It feels really like a weird use of page space.
Yep.
And not to be critical, but the gang war thing going on, it's not that I don't think gang war and gang violence is real, but we're in a world where people shoot lasers. So all of these bullets feel really like, yes, they are very scary and very real, but the lasers are scarier and the lasers are realer. And when you get struck by a laser, you disintegrate. It's a little different.
This is a sci-fi superhero. This is not a street level superhero. This is a superhero where it's really fun when the archetype appears in a street level book. So like a pair up between Daredevil and Spider-Man is always a great thing. Spider-Man having, you know, an arc with antagonism from like a 3-issue arc with antagonism from the Kingpin is great. But to let it go on too long without some interaction from weird Spider Universe stuff just gets a little stale. And this has gone on a while and it's there are people and elements to it that are good, like sci-fi tropey, like it would work for who May is, but it's really attached to this story of like just these two mob bosses fighting over turf.
And neither one of them is like actually one of the characters that we care about.
Right.
The characters that we care about are just trying to overthrow one of them. But, you know, Crazy 8 and Funny Face are somehow the characters we're supposed to be following here. And that the whole thing pays off with May protecting young Spider Kid, which ultimately gets Crazy 8 shot and murdered. And, you know, it's really not May's actions leads to Crazy 8's death. Mr. Nobody firing a gun in a, you know, battle situation is what leads to Crazy 8's death. So when Funny Face is like, I will get my revenge on you, it's just like painfully stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I both buy it and don't buy it. It's the bigger problem is, again, like there's just too much going on. There's too much chaos. There's too many storylines. I can buy Funny Face thinking that this is May's fault because he's a crazy, like, jester-themed supervillain that, you know, plausibly is not going to have the best state of mental health. But I probably want and need more setup to get there and to care, and less on the other stuff. So when it finally comes, it's just like there's been so much happening. While I like noticed that was the most interesting storyline, it didn't get the time to develop for me. So I don't really buy it. I'm not really invested. I can kind of like no prize it. Like I can make it work in my head, but that's asking a lot of the reader.
Yeah, it really is, because the reader is hoping for better, you know, by the fact that we are in the Nuff Said issue in the next month. Funeral for a Fiend, in which May has to come to terms with the loss of Crazy 8. And it's not like she fell for him or anything, but she feels responsible. This is her first like major death that she's connected with. And I want to start with, this was a company-wide initiative. Just to give a little background on the Nuff Said month, editor-in-chief Joe Quesada had felt as though they had taken enough hits on the chin that all Marvel had been good for in the last number of years was clever wordplay and snappy dialogue in a way that did not really have meaningful stories. You know, DC was still, you know, able to claim market share sometimes at this point. So we were in a really unique situation where Marvel wanted to do something one of a kind, and they came up with the Nuff Said month. And Nuff Said was an entire month of as little dialogue as possible, if not, you know, no dialogue. And I think, knowing what I know about the number of Nuff Said issues, honestly, the Spider-Girl Nuff Said issue was a real success.
I couldn't agree more. It's a blessing and curse situation for this book and this issue, because what it shows you is Tom DeFalco is a writer with a ton of talent, but he has parts of his writing that are lacking, dialogue being one of the really huge ones. And the book is so packed with dialogue that when it's all removed, you have this incredibly elevated issue. But as soon as you get over how good the issue is, the first thing you think is, we could use a lot more of something like this.
I agree. And it's of note that the editors have changed again. Now the assistant editors are Jeff Youngquist and Mark Summerack, with Tom Brevoort on overall editing. And maybe that's where that gut-wrenching opening with opening up the body bag and taking off all of the ridiculous makeup and stripping down, you know, Crazy 8 to a really good-looking, fit blonde guy. He's not this dark-haired, nonsense, crazy man. There's such a humanity to him laying there dead in his briefs. Like, it's gut-wrenching.
Yep. And I even really buy May's upset at what has happened and her own kind of heartbreak at what she feels that she has allowed to happen. Again, it's one of those things where if you present it in a stark way that I have time to absorb, I will definitely do the work, and I'm happy to do it. I can fill in what she's feeling here, even if I think like, well, she shouldn't feel that way. It wasn't really her fault. Like these are criminals. They did a criminal thing. She's a hero. She's trying to save everybody and stop the crime, not, you know, just kill villains. That's not her deal. So when this happens, it's a loss for her. And because this is such a tight, focused issue that doesn't pack in so many of the other storylines that I don't care about, that's where I'll do the work, as opposed to last issue where, you know, there was so much happening, I wasn't up to the task.
And being up to the task is a really important element of this issue, because it's not that she is incapable of turning to Phil well. It's not that she's incapable of turning to her father, but she knows Norman has taken a life. So like maybe Normie could understand a little better. Whereas Phil might think it's partially his fault.
Yeah.
May was only there to get revenge for him.
Yeah. And even the like Nancy Lou page kind of works for me. Again, because it's quick, it's really stark. It does feel connected to something greater.
And that connection is something greater when they show us Jessica Drew. See what happens when you
Yep.
use the wrong spider person for no reason? So when Jessica Drew is like, my son is looking at pictures of maybe himself, of maybe the other Spider-Man, I understand he was involved in this. The only thing that really doesn't work for me is the fact that Crazy 8 is in a casket the same night. Or is it the next day? Like, so much is happening, and the idea that this is all being told without words, because this is so much emotional inevitability, is something that I think is important to the story. There is so much, this is how it had to go, that they have set up that by this issue, it can just happen. It can just happen. That's fine.
I think that's true. And I think like the moment with Nancy Lou is a good example of that, because the high school stuff has been going on in the previous issues, and I wish it hadn't, but we actually can wrap up a lot of stuff by just having one page where they look at each other and both feel kind of sad that they're so unable to connect. It kind of can speak for all the high school drama and just acknowledge that like they all should be in a better place, rather than having to go through so much like dialogue and recognition of situations that aren't really that compelling.
Though the most compelling thing in the entire world for me was when Canis was going to leave. Like, I get choked up that May came out to save this spider kid. Like, this is where May is my hero. This is where she gets the Spider-Verse. You know what I mean? That she knew that Canis was going to probably kill the spider kid if he got his hands on him. But May is just like, no, let me take him. Like, oh my God, that hit me so hard. So good.
See, for me, it was Peter and Normie.
Oh, that Peter and Normie scene where he sees him in the mask and oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, that really was it for me, because they haven't had a reckoning, and Mary Jane did have one with him, and they're on good terms, but Mary Jane's relationship is different, and Peter has a responsibility to look at him as a potential threat still, or maybe not even a responsibility because he's not really a superhero anymore, but an instinct to do so, while at the same time it's a kid that he saw be born and be a baby, so like there's a certain level of wanting to just love this fucking kid, and they're finally able to get there and just have a moment where they hug, and I just loved it.
The thing I'm sure you didn't love, however, how scared were you for a minute that I let you wonder that was going to be Typhoid Mary? Were you at all terrified for just a second when they finally show Angel Face that she was going to be Typhoid Mary, because who the fuck is this woman in this weird face paint?
I did have a brief second where I thought, also it wasn't even so much the slight hint of red hair and the white face and the pink lip. It was the cross hatching on the back of her straitjacket.
Yup.
That looks very much like Mary's fishnets. I had 1 second, but then it became pretty obvious.
She is Angel Face. Angel Face being a character who has ever appeared twice in the mainstream Marvel universe, meaning she has far more appearances in MC2. And you know why that is? Because she really did only fight the Green Goblin once. Issues 7 and 8 of Green Goblin's original run, she fights Green Goblin, and her name there is Angel Face, one word, which made the research on this a little difficult.
God, that's a important detail. I guess they weren't really thinking about all of us, like looking back on this and, Googling stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't even a Google thought at the time.
Yeah.
So she's not super compelling. I don't know if she's meant to be like, a female crime boss in the great tradition of Punisher and the female crime bosses that populate those titles. But I don't know. And not like in a picking on it way, but there really is something that I can tell this is a Ron Friends issue. The slightly higher polish of Pat O'Leaf, the fill-in art, it's all kind of a little bit more modern, young, and shiny looking. So when we're on a Ron Friends issue, it does feel a little older. Like, for instance, Empire Records Mayday.
Yeah, the glasses and the hat, the blossom hat and the long coat are a little
It's all a little
painful.
precious. Yeah, a little precious.
And of course, you know, this is so tough because we have immediately gone back to too much happening, too much dialogue. We are right back in the thick of it. And as much as I'm eager to sort of see some of this stuff come to fruition, it's tough, having had such a strong issue before this, to go back to this like packed chaos.
It really is, because they start adding more things that we just don't need. All of a sudden, it's Jess and Julia and Peter, and Angel Face is teaming up with Funny Face. I'm glad the two with the same name survived, I guess. I don't know. And she doesn't know where her son is, but don't worry, because her son is hanging out with Dark Devil, who I barely remember is in this book.
Yep.
But thank God Courtney has her sociology and you a text. I mean,
this is a moment I love because May says, no, I don't want to get involved. And I just I was hoping that would be a thesis statement for future high school shit endeavors. Unfortunately, it is not. But I appreciated that moment because yes, May, run with that instinct.
And it's so important that May do her best to not get involved in that sort of much lesser story, because the stories that May is ramping up toward, yeah, I actually wish that the kids were like a 2-page J2 style backup story, because, okay, well, I'm glad Kingpin came up. If Dark Devil is going to be there, I think, you know, it reminds us what's going on there. But there's so many stories that are really starting to like park on top of each other. And now Brad is here to punch the shit out of Jimmy in front of Heather, and Moose, whose hand is frighteningly large in one panel and then frighteningly small in the next, is like, don't punch, Courtney says no. What?
Yep, it continues to not impress me or engage me in any way.
Also, why does May assume an empty wheelchair means her mother has been, I don't know, eaten?
Yeah, what could the emergency be? She got out of it. She's clearly doing better. I don't know, you know, and just delicate pregnancy, man. I don't want it for Mary Jane.
Well, and then Mary Jane's like, you never met Aunt May, but she's really cool. And I just wish Mayday was like, fuck you, no, I met Aunt May. Ha ha.
I'm a time traveler. Why do I care about high school?
Right? Oh my God. And
time has no meaning to me.
And this whole idea that Peter comes up with, where he's like, don't worry, you're not as good a mom as I am.
Yeah, let's go over your backstory one more time. I don't know. I think it's important that we just review this thing and get this panel of the fucking kid in the tube. And also, I will take care of your parenting troubles.
And then we get that ridiculous Nova panel that means nothing. Nova's just there to remind her that sometimes superheroes team up. Are you kidding me?
It's there because the writers want to call her team the New Warriors. They don't need to be the New Warriors. And then we didn't need this panel with Nova. Like, she could have just thought of a team up and they could have been whatever they wanted.
But I love this team.
Yeah, it's
Raptor,
a great team.
Green Goblin, Lady Hawk, and the Buzz. Man, for that cover that says Spider-Girl and her amazing friends, like, I would do just about anything for that somewhat off costume cover.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like, you see them together in the previous issue on the last panel, and these are her friends. In and out of costume, these are her buddies. These are the people that she should be talking to. When there's drama, it should be between them. And I'm stoked to see them coming together like this.
The fight, however, really doesn't do much for me. It's one of those, a little too much is going on, and they keep trying to buy our time during the fight in a way that I'm just never sure who's hitting who. Like, there's so many fists flying back and forth that I have trouble following the fight sequences, so that when May is like, we need to stop this fighting, I'm like, thank God.
You don't always have to add another thing. Take two things off. That's what they always say. Like, you didn't need Dark Devil in this. It's extra chaos that isn't necessary. Get him out of there. We already have a team. Or put him on the team, I guess, and take somebody else. He was one person too many, and it did just get very confusing.
By the time May brings this whole fight to a conclusion by striking a deal with with Angel Face, it just feels like a little too late. Like, I understand that they were trying to show her make a bad decision, but I don't know, there really isn't honor among thieves, and the idea that Spider-Girl is suddenly going to trust this woman, it is a little more naive than I'm looking.
I like the idea that she wants to do it. The idea that she makes the deal without talking to anybody else and, without consulting this group. That's the part that really gets me. The idea that she is so unfailingly like, I think people can be better and they said they would. I totally buy that. But I also buy that she would go to her friends and when they said no, something else would happen because she would realize that she is off somehow. The plot device of her getting this so wrong, better than a lot of them, so okay, but we got there in a very weird way and we carry it on kind of clumsily.
Especially because the end of this issue, I could not believe there was another issue in this trade.
Yeah.
Like, how is issue 44 part of this same run? Though my favorite moment in all of 43 is Raptor being like, I stand with Spider-Girl. Girl, you fucked up.
Yep, it's so good. I mean, because and again, this is her friend who is also a total fuck up in a costume, who's probably going to prison because we haven't really worked that out either. She can definitely tell her girlfriend, I've seen fuck ups because I've done fuck ups and you fucked up.
Speaking of fucked up, Phil is just like, I'm anti-May. It's fine. What the fuck, Phil?
Yeah, this is like your niece. Immediately you're just like, she sucks at this. I, Phil Urich, the blue whale, am crushing it and we need to take this girl down a peg.
It is so random that Phil finds himself with a team by virtue of I don't know, the machinations to get here are almost as ridiculous as All Winners Electronics. I do not care for Charlie Phillips. No, I don't.
And it's just with Lady Hawk on the team, you have the perfect person to be the voice of thinking May sucks and for everybody else to be like, I don't want to say it, but we have to admit she did make the wrong decision. And the idea that it's Phil after all this time is just, it adds just another level of not liking this character for me.
And speaking of after all this time and not liking this character, is this the first Spider-Man proper flashback to his origin in the whole series?
It is. This, I don't know how they thought this was the time to explain this.
Probably the same reason he was like, I just thought about it, but I'm really bad at making you web shooters.
Yeah, it immediately has the thought that I can give you a defensive missile in your web shooter. You've been doing this for years now at this point, who knows, a while. And I just realized that I can, and the fact that he tells the Clone Saga badly and just confuses it intentionally because he doesn't want to say that they're clones.
Right? Because I think the word clone was a dirty word, but they really wanted to use Scarlet Spider because it's such a good look and no one could use it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but as somebody who's really only tied to Spider-Man was the Clone Saga, that was the only time in the 90s where I was like, I don't know, I'll give this a try. It just, to me, the idea that they made it somehow more convoluted because they just weren't willing to actually explain it after explaining Spider-Boy's origin story 3 different times is insanity to me.
With essentially the same flashback art each time.
Yeah.
It's
just that tube. It's her waiting outside that tube every time.
Yeah. I don't know. And I do want to point out that the cover to this issue, the covers are becoming madness. If I were looking at this book in order, I would not be able to tell an arc to these covers at all.
100%.
They don't look the same style. The art is all over the place. It just doesn't feel like one fluid look to this book. Inside is one thing. The insides, even when there's fill-ins, they are very consistent. But yeah, man, these covers are getting weird.
Yeah, how they're tying into the story, it's not the craziest thing in comic books for the cover to kind of lie a little bit, but this is not really the return of the Scarlet Spider. We're getting something in the next arc, but even here, we're not there yet.
And I think in part, that might even be why they thought that just bringing Riley Tyne up again would do enough for it, because he's automatically connected in some ways. But I feel like the Dark Devil Raptor stuff, I keep forgetting that Normie and Raptor are dating, at all.
Yeah, having Dark Devil in the book and having Riley be a kind of acknowledged presence, but not really bringing him into the fold feels like a dangling plot thread, especially when you bring up Ben Riley for the first time.
Although, I feel like there was no way to get around it. I guess we were eventually going to see Ben Riley, and it had to happen. You know what I mean? Like the cover literally said for like the first 3 years, daughter of the true Spider-Man. But to also get that Peter's like, I'm ready to put the costume back on this issue. We just got rid of the other fucking Spider-Man.
Yeah, don't do that.
What do you mean?
And also for him to be like, it's the same thing as the web shooters, for him to be like, oh, that bionic leg that Reed Richards could have made me this whole time, so I never had to stop doing this.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Spider-Girl came out at the wrong time by 5 years. If it had been 5 years sooner, it could have gotten away with a lot more because people weren't thinking about it. And if it had been 5 years later, it would have been perhaps a little bit more tightly put together.
Yeah.
Because this book came out at the advent of the internet, and not the advent, but like, 2000 to 2001 is when it really, really started booming into homes in a very different way. And high-speed internet was becoming more of a thing. And the reason this is significant is because you can also see this transformation in sitcoms, where you went from an age where the best you could do is the retelling that they tell in every episode. So, the Deviant Saga didn't happen how the Deviant Saga happened. It happened how Thor 307 abridged it. And I think Spider-Girl, being born of an era that wanted to keep getting away with oblique references to things you never read, that we now think, when a book does that, we now think that's the bee's knees. That's the cutest fucking thing you can throw in. Editor's notes to issues that don't exist because this is an AU title. That stuff bangs now. But if Spider-Girl did that, we would have found it misleading. And it was at a point where people could start to go onto Marvel Fandom Wikia and look up what happened in that issue. It was really bad timing for Spider-Girl.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And, I think similarly, we were starting to see better writing for teens. So the expectations really are higher at this point, and this book is just glaringly not getting it.
Yeah, and while I do think that this run did include by far the best issue of the series so far in the Nuff Said issue, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say I think it was 32, the Steel Spider issue, was the worst issue of the series. And, I think for every Dark Devil where it's just so good, there's an Amazing Spider-Boy where it's just not so good.
Yep, I completely agree. And seeing all these elements that I'm absolutely loving and want to focus on and not getting the time to focus on them, it's both glorious and painful at times.
And all I hope for is probably a little bit better on the back end. I'll be honest, I'm going to give these 2 volumes B minuses. These were not as strong as the first volume we looked at this episode, and I think she's starting to show some approaching 50 wear.
Yeah.
And, that's a real wear and tear because they're still using all the same characters. I don't think we've gotten a major new concept on any level new since probably the Buzz in the annual. I think everything other than that has been shades of something else.
Yeah, which is, it's tough because I don't really want this book introducing new stuff because it just packs stuff in. But I also do want it because I don't want it packing stuff in. I want so much of that stripped away so that it can introduce higher quality new stuff more sparingly.
I almost wish that this book had been 25 4-issue miniseries.
Yeah.
It would have changed everything about how they approached everything. And, it would have been Spider-Girl, Year of the Octopus. And then Spider-Girl, vultures, and then Spider-Girl, Goblin at the Gate. I don't, you could just, it would have been like these tight little minis that would have punctuated the same ideas, but without, because the open-endedness, the open worldness is what's ruining this book. That is absolutely what is ruining this book for me. That Tom DeFalco seems to think this book is going to run forever, and the problem is it does.
Yep.
I think about economy of page, because that's what it comes down to.
It seems that nobody is editing to remind him to think of it.
I think about the fact that Sir Anthony Hopkins improv'd the hiss at Loki, which is actually one of my and Kevo's favorite things in the entire world. My husband Kevo, amazing media production artist for the show. He and I love in Thor when Odin's pissed at Thor and Loki says, "But father," and Anthony Hopkins just goes, "Ha!" Evidently, that is improv'd, and the look on Tom Hiddleston's face is actual fear. I think about the fact that how could anybody tell Sir Anthony Hopkins, put that hiss away? Oh, right, that one was directed by Kenneth Branagh. if someone was going to tell him, hey, and I'm not saying that Tom DeFalco is Sir Anthony Hopkins, but if I were, I would definitely be implying that Tom Brevoort is Kenneth Branagh. And this disturbing metaphor cleaned up a little bit. You finally had somebody in the office. I'm just left confused why he didn't.
Because the book was selling the number of issues that it was going to sell consistently every month, and it was very easy to produce, apparently, so just let it keep running and don't make waves.
Well, I gave him B minuses. What would you give the second 2 volumes of this episode?
Definitely B minus for the second volume. I could go up to B, maybe even B plus, because that Nuff Said issue is really solid, and it shows you everything you need to know about why this is a book and a character to love, like so iconically that it is defining for the series. And I think because of that, it raises up the volume as a whole. But the surrounding stories are not super great. Again, really cool concept. The team up, I'm so here for it. Angel Face and Funny Face, like, sure, I'm kind of into it. I can get there, but just, packed with stuff that is getting in the way of those stories blossoming the way they ought to.
I really look forward to returning to the pages of Spider-Girl because I have high hopes. I really do. For 45 to 66, I know that there's a pretty strong reset point around 50 in some regard. That's a really big thing for them. That 50, 51, that's always a big thing for Marvel. They love those solid numbers. And that run actually represents the end of what is currently in digest form numeric. After that, we're going to have some issues that are exclusive to Marvel Unlimited at this point, followed by the return to multi-story storytelling with a major crossover for the MC2 universe. So if we can get through 2 more episodes, about 6 volumes, admittedly, I am saying the same number of issues of Spider-Girl we have already covered completely. We will be covering in 2 episodes, 44 issues, right? If we can make it through that, we will return to Spider-Girl and other books for the rest of the run.
I'm excited about that. That sort of grand scale of coverage and moving forward into the future. I want to believe that by the time we hit the end, we will have seen a subtle shift to more sophisticated writing. I'm not 100% on that, but things are going to change over those years and for the production of this book. And I'm hoping it's for the better.
I mean, I'm telling you, Last Hero Standing changed everything. So until we return to the MC2 universe to take a look at more wacky misadventures of the most unlikely spider lady ever, who is the most likely spider character of all time, Mayday Parker. TK, where can everybody find you online?
You can find me talking about comics on our sister show, parent show, XI4P Podcast, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at xnateXgrayX.
Don't forget, you guys can check me out also over on the Billy Club with Tori Sheehan, where the 2 of us examine Daredevil, everybody's favorite yellow-bellied fear man from the beginning, and I couldn't love it more. Of course, you can also find me on XI4P Podcast, as well as in the upcoming Young Men in Love anthology being released in June. Don't forget to order it from Diamond or your local retailer. It also has amazing contributions from guys like Sina Grace, Anthony Oliveira, Joe Glass, and more, so you don't want to miss that book. I'm so proud to be a part of it. You guys can check me out over on Twitter and Instagram at Nico Action. That's NicoAction. And until next time, keep it too many spider people.
Keep it loose and slam some heat.
Fuck.